It all begins in the divine realm, an incredible place full of floating islands and wonderful waterfalls, where the most powerful beings in the universe live. We're then taken to a huge colosseum in the middle of a forest, as the announcer asks for everyone's attention for what's about to happen on stage. A red-haired goddess watches over everything as the narrator introduces a human who possesses a power greater than that of the gods themselves. Then, important historical figures watch as the strongest hero in Greek mythology prepares to make his grand entrance. At this moment, we discover a ceremony is underway to choose the new divine king, which is why all the gods have gathered to vote. Suddenly, we see a muscular hand gripping a club with great force as the energy around it begins to vibrate intensely. With an absurd impact, the warrior unleashes a blast of lightning in the middle of the arena, leaving the entire audience impressed by such a display. Then appears the legendary demigod Hercules, showing off his muscles and holding his weapon as golden lightning surrounds his imposing body. The brute gives a confident smile, showing he's ready to take control of everything and prove that no one is a match for his physical strength. But the dog-faced announcer interrupts the show and announces the start of the vote to decide if the hero of the 12 labors will be the new king. It turns out that when they ask those in favor to raise their hands, silence fills the place, and no one moves to support the candidate. Realizing he didn't receive a single vote, the big guy is completely dumbfounded and doesn't understand why nobody wants him in charge of the realm. Meanwhile, in the audience, other gods seem totally bored, and some even take a nap, because this situation has become routine. The problem is that this choice must be by a simple majority, but since everyone there is selfish, the debate has been going on for over 300 years with no solution. Far away, a white-haired girl watches the mess on a screen and comments that this issue will never truly be decided. We find out that this young girl is actually the current god king, Zeus, but she's bored to tears with all this unnecessary bureaucracy. Then, the short girl starts jumping on the throne and demands that her assistant think of something much more exciting to pass the free time. The secretary suggests organizing a fighting tournament, but the ruler thinks the idea is a total drag because she doesn't want to repeat what's been done before. With a sinister look, the little one warns that if it were just a test of strength, she would take everyone out in the blink of an eye. Finally, the assistant remembers that a calamity has emerged in the underworld. While the sovereign confesses, she's already forgotten the problem's name. The assistant is shocked that her boss forgot about such a serious problem and gives her a stern look for her lack of memory. Then she recalls that a gate appeared out of nowhere, in the middle of the city, causing a huge explosion of purple energy on the pavement. This portal appeared without any warning, catching all the humans completely by surprise with its sudden arrival. Right after, a giant, dark gate manifested in the human world, floating among the dark clouds in the sky. With that, a shower of fire meteors began to fall from the sky, destroying everything and terrifying the population below. On top of that, to the humans' despair, the gate released several creatures, one after another, to attack the planet. First, some small, green creatures with red eyes shining in the darkness of the night came out of there. These monsters were wild goblins that soon began to attack the defenseless people running through the city. Humanity called this event the Gate of Ruin, or Ragnarok, and the situation became very serious for everyone. Back in the divine realm, the assistant is worried, but the queen doesn't seem to care and even praises the humans for trying hard. Suddenly, the white-haired girl stands up from the throne as if she's had a brilliant idea to solve her boredom. With a mischievous smile on her face, she tells her helper that she's just thought of something really good to do. The new rule for choosing the king is that whoever makes a contract with a human and solves the gate problem will be the winner. The ruler explains that this would serve as a limitation for the gods and would be fun like a game for her to watch. She continues, saying that the candidates can cooperate or eliminate each other, as the savior will be the next king of the gods. With an excited shout, the little one announces the start of a battle royal where gods, heroes, and humans will form teams. 10 years later, in the human world, we see a guy getting chewed out by a blonde bully who throws a bucket of water on him. The blonde guy complains that he's wasting time training a useless person, but suddenly a giant explosion happens in the background. Everyone is startled by the explosion, and one of the boys tries to see what's happening amidst the smoke and fire. In the middle of the confusion, giant ant-like monsters appear and start attacking, while people run in desperation. Amidst the chaos, a figure in flames attacks one of the giant insects with a swift and precise blow. From the flames emerges a mysterious hunter who floats in the air, enveloped by an overwhelming golden power. We find out he is Yuzuki Kamio, ranked 5th, and the contractor of the powerful sun god Rei. The hero is super popular and receives several fan letters as he floats through the city with his flames. Some students comment that he defeated the monsters with a single blow, and that hunters with gods are insane. Then the blonde bully turns to the red-haired boy and says that he must feel it more than anyone. He is Hinata Kamio, Yuzuki's older brother, an F-rank support who has no divine contract. Meanwhile, the famous hunter watches the city from the top of a building with a blank expression on his face. Suddenly, the talented young man's face changes to one of pure rage, showing his dark side. Elsewhere, the blonde guy and his friends corner Hinata and ask if he and his brother are really twins. One of the boys mocks him for being an F rank with no contract while the bully pulls his hair hard. At that moment, a mysterious figure appears at the end of the alley, and the bully's eyes go wide with fear. The newcomer is Yuzuki, who asks with a smile if he can join in on the fun too. With that, the bullies are terrified and run out of the alley as fast as they can. The weaker brother thanks his savior, who gently and protectively ruffles his hair. The young hero advises his relative to stand up for himself, or else people will keep taking advantage of him forever. But out of nowhere, the popular one throws a violent punch into his brother's stomach, who doesn't understand the sudden attack. The poor guy spits up a strange liquid and falls to the ground, feeling unbearable pain from the blow. The black-haired boy says that only he is allowed to bully his older brother and no one else. To top it off, he kicks the guy on the ground and states that being weak is completely pathetic. With his foot on his brother, he says the poor guy can't even protect himself from danger. Suddenly, the aggressor notices a mysterious shadow on the roof of a nearby building watching the scene. The dark figure with purple eyes tells the boy to continue and enjoy the moment of humiliation. Then the younger brother tells the other to savor the pain of being looked down on by everyone around him. Lying on the ground, the redhead yells that if things were as they should be, all that power would be his. The black-haired young man becomes furious and says with a scary look that he had warned him never to bring that up again. With that, the story goes back to the past, showing that in their childhood, the situation between the two was very different. The narrator says that he believed he had the happiest family in the world as his mother praised him at the table. The little boy smiles happily as he gets a pat on the head for getting a perfect score on his test. Meanwhile, Yuzuki watched everything from a distance with a sad face, holding his own school evaluation. The other boy's grade was very low, and out of shame, he had completely crumpled the paper. Their father tries to console the boy, saying he could do it too, since they were twins after all. But the black-haired boy seemed to carry a different, dark feeling inside him since he was little. The mother tries to lighten the mood by saying the other son had also done well in math. The little redhead is surprised and doesn't understand what his mother meant by that comment. Suddenly, the woman looks out the window and sees a giant, bizarre monster with one pink eye staring at them. The creature invades the house, breaking everything, and the mother grabs her son to try to protect him from the danger. The monster was hideous, with several weird eyes and sharp teeth, ready for a final attack. At that moment, the family's father throws himself in front of the other son to save him from the creature's blow. The creature attacks with full force, and in the middle of the explosion, it seems like it ate the black-haired boy's test paper. In the middle of the burning house, the boy despairs upon seeing his mother trapped in the rubble and screams for her. With a determined look, the little redhead decides he's not going to leave his mother behind in that fiery inferno. From afar, a divine figure watches the boy, bravely running through the flames to the rescue. The sun god, Ra, wonders why that boy is running straight into the fire without any fear. His mother begs him to run, but the boy ignores the warning and says he's almost there to save her. The boy uses all his strength to push the debris, while the ceiling starts to collapse on them. The woman looks up, terrified, realizing the ceiling is going to fall right on top of her brave son. In a final act of love, she pushes the boy away so he won't be crushed by the debris. With that, the rebel completely collapses, and the woman ends up buried forever underneath it all. The little one cries desperately, seeing that he couldn't save his mother and is now all alone. Outside, the boy sits looking at the burning house, unable to believe what just happened. Nearby, his brother observes their father's hand on the ground and realizes he didn't survive the attack either. A mysterious voice tells the boy that it saw his entire little display of courage in that moment. The voice continues, saying it was looking for someone who doesn't tremble before the flames of the underworld. The sun god appears in all his glory and says that this is the kind of man he really likes. The entity extends its hand to the boy and offers him the chance to make a powerful contract with it. The two shake hands, sealing the pact with a golden light as his brother shouts his name in the background. At that moment, the little redhead runs out of the burning house to see what was happening outside. He finds the sun god holding his brother, who now has a small golden flame in his hand. Rai questions if he chose the wrong human as Hinata runs to his brother, asking where their father is. With an evil smile, Yuzuki holds the golden flame in his hands, feeling the power of the sun god. When his brother tries to get closer, the boy attacks him with a blast of fire, shouting not to be touched. The explosion of flames throws the little redhead far away, hitting him hard against a concrete wall. Fallen and hurt, the poor guy doesn't understand why his own brother attacked him in such a cruel way. With the power of the contract, the boy accuses the other of always looking down on him for being the younger, useless brother. He screams with hatred that the other was only chosen as the older brother by pure luck and nothing more. But now things have changed, and he was the one chosen by the god to receive an incredible and limitless power. With a villainous laugh, the boy prepares another attack, saying his brother is getting what he deserves. Then he fires a huge column of golden energy that destroys everything in its path with its power. The little redhead is left lying on the ground, completely defeated, while the flame of the contract burns beside him. The aggressor celebrates, saying it's now his turn to look down on his brother and show who's superior. Back in the present, the sun god floats between the two brothers in the alley, his golden aura shining. Ra apologizes, saying he mistook the redhead for someone else, and introduces himself as the Egyptian god. The entity complains that it's hard to tell humans apart, especially when they are identical twins. The older brother gets angry and asks how the god can laugh after seeing his power being used that way. Angrily, the young man opens his shirt and shows a large sun-shaped burn on his chest. The god is asked if he doesn't regret the choice he made, but he replies that he actually doesn't care. The young man is shocked and disgusted by the entity's attitude, which shows no remorse for what happened. The deity explains that in his family, it's quite common for siblings to eliminate each other, showing his family tree. He finishes by saying that modern humans worry too much about love and can't survive on their own. The god explains that Yuzuki is different, as his cold nature is perfect for a warrior, and he matches his power. That's why he states he couldn't ask for a better partner in this era, while the redhead can't believe what he's hearing. With an evil smile, the younger brother asks if the other heard clearly what the god just told him. Then he says goodbye to the poor guy, calling him a talentless nobody before finally leaving. Just then, the pair receives an emergency call about a new mission that suddenly appeared nearby. The boy says that's great news, since he didn't get a chance to let loose much in the last fight he had. With his vision blurred, the young man faints in the dark alley after all the humiliation he just suffered. Some time passes, and night finally falls on the city as the streetlights begin to turn on. Suddenly, the red-haired boy wakes up on the alley floor, still feeling the pain from his brother's attack. He gets up with difficulty and wonders how long he was passed out in that cold, lonely place. In another part of the city, a blonde guy seems to be feeling sick and leans on a lamppost to keep from falling, but the effort is useless, and the boy ends up falling to his knees on the sidewalk, completely exhausted and weak. The redhead remembers that since their parents' passing, his brother became increasingly tyrannical and aggressive towards him. But he was the only one in the world who knew his brother's true nature behind that hero fame, and whenever he saw his brother being acclaimed by the public, he couldn't help but think of one specific thing. Back in the present, the young man cries, leaning against the post, as he thinks again about the day his parents passed. A tear runs down his face as he imagines how different everything would be if things had changed on that terrible day. He wishes his brother had been the one to go, and out of nowhere, a huge explosion happens right behind him. The impact throws the boy far away, and he is shocked to see that the explosion came from a strange creature. The monster, which looks like a giant, armored armadillo, is now fallen and defeated in the middle of the destroyed street. The boy is startled to see that the defeated creature was actually his brother, lying on the ground all beaten up. He doesn't understand anything that happened there as the street begins to be taken over by a bluish energy. Suddenly, a huge column of water explodes from the ground with absurd force, destroying everything around. Lying on the sidewalk, the redhead notices a puddle of water moving on its own towards him in a very strange way. From the waters emerges an S-rank elemental creature called an Undyine, which completely nullifies fire attacks. The young man realizes the monster hasn't noticed them yet and thinks he needs to get his brother out of there as quickly as possible. He looks at the fallen Yuzuki and tries to shout for him to run, but fear completely paralyzes him at that moment. In that instant, a dark and tempting thought starts to cross the young man's mind in the midst of the chaos. He wonders what would happen if he simply abandoned his brother to his fate in that dark alley. With that, he remembers all the suffering he went through and thinks his crappy life could finally get better. The poor guy is frozen on the ground, completely torn between saving his brother or letting fate take its course. Suddenly, a mysterious and dark voice asks why he is suffering so much with that decision. The voice says this is the perfect chance for him to get revenge, and all he needs to do is look the other way. The entity tells the young man to look at the water creature, which is now approaching his unconscious brother on the ground. The voice continues, saying it knows about his envy and that if he leaves his brother there, his wish will come true. With this, he realizes that if he does nothing, his wish for his brother to disappear will finally become a reality. The boy has an expression of pure conflict, breaking out in a cold sweat, not knowing which path to take at that moment. The dark entity then gives him two options: run away to live, or fight the monster and meet his end. The young man thinks that if he just walked away now, his life would change forever, and he would be free from his brother. But as he remembers his mother being crushed, he seems to make a final decision about what he must do. At that moment, the young man remembers his mother's last request as he saw her face for the last time, asking him to take care of his younger brother. With that, the young man feels the weight of responsibility and starts to cry, realizing that even after being humiliated, he still needs to be the protector. Then, the hero's gaze changes completely, and he sets aside his fear to focus only on what truly matters in that moment of danger. The redhead then jumps with all his might and wonders what he's thinking, but decides to act even knowing he's just considered a weak idiot. But even though he hates his relative, the boy throws himself in front of danger and states that he is still the older brother and therefore won't run from the fight. Meanwhile, the dark entity comments that his heart is too soft and that this excessive kindness is just foolishness of the highest order. Suddenly, the shadow shows a sinister smile and admits that deep down, that attitude is something noble and worthy of its full attention and respect. Then the mysterious voice reveals that it has taken a liking to the boy and offers a powerful contract, so he can finally change his destiny once and for all. The young man is confused and yells, asking who that bizarre figure is, while the shadow says he shouldn't worry about that right now. At that moment, the water monster prepares to attack with full force, as the atmosphere around them becomes increasingly heavy and dangerous for the two. With an intense glow, the elemental creature concentrates its blue energy and shows it will have no mercy for anyone in its path. Suddenly, a huge explosion of water hits the pavement, and the young man tries to protect his unconscious relative as the impact destroys everything around. With the blow, both are thrown far away and are left lying on the ground, completely vulnerable to the monster's next final blow. The pavement cracks completely, creating a giant crater, while the redhead is impressed by the level of destruction from that overwhelming power. But the shadow warns that if the desire to protect his family is real, the boy must shout with all the strength of his lungs to seal the pact. The entity then whispers dark words into the young man's ear and asks if he is ready to accept the consequences of this new power. Then the protagonist's eyes gain a different glint, showing that he has finally made his decision and will not go back on his choice. Angrily, the hero shouts that if the entity is a disappointment, he will never forgive it, as he faces the water creature without a shred of fear. In that instant, the young man opens his mouth to unleash his first attack command, and the air around him begins to vibrate with a dark, dense energy. Finally, the young man unleashes the secret technique of the Black Blade to trap the enemy in the shadow and shows that he now also possesses a divine power. With a dark aura, the boy prepares to unleash his new ability with a war cry. The elemental creature is completely shocked to realize its opponent now has such a dense power. Without wasting time, the water monster counter attacks and fires several ice spears at high speed, but the projectiles are useless and crash against the shadow defense without causing a single scratch. The dark energy proves to be very resistant and absorbs all the attacks without taking any damage. From the shadows emerges the redhead with a new look and a katana in hand, ready to start the battle. With a serious look, the hero prepares to show the true potential of his newly made contract. Then he warns the creature that he is not a god and that he has no connection with them. The young man also states that he is not a hero as the monster prepares another powerful water attack. With absurd speed, the young man charges towards the enemy for a direct and precise attack. Dodging the projectiles, the boy gets closer and closer, showing his new agility in combat. Angrily, he shouts that even so, he will fight with everything he has to protect his younger brother. With that, the protagonist manages to land several cuts on the creature, which doesn't understand his speed. The elemental monster stands still under the moonlight, looking much weaker than before the attack. With a final blow from his dark blade, the young man finishes the fight once and for all. He now feels that he finally has the power necessary to protect those who are important to him. With that, the water creature is divided into several pieces and is finally defeated forever. From above, the boy looks at the remains of the monster and wonders if he really defeated an S rank. The young man is shocked for being just an F rank and having accomplished such a great feat alone. Suddenly, he remembers his brother and runs to see if his relative is still alive after everything. The redhead runs to his brother and desperately asks if he is okay after the whole attack. He then moves closer to his relative's face to check his breathing very carefully and attentively. Seeing that the other is still alive, the young man is relieved and is thankful he survived. But suddenly, the water monster begins to regenerate behind him, catching the hero by surprise. Angrily, the boy yells that he can't believe that thing is still alive and prepares to fight. However, the young man is confused and seems not to know what to do with the sword in his hands at that moment. He tries to use the power from before, but realizes he can't remember how to activate the ability. Desperately, the redhead starts to break into a cold sweat, seeing that the enemy won't wait for him to remember. Then the creature creates several water spheres, and the boy panics for not knowing how to attack. With that, the monster fires a shower of blue energy beams towards the two brothers. The hero tries to defend himself, but the attacks are so fast that he can't follow their trajectory. Then he shouts to the entity and asks how he can use that dark power again in the fight, but the new partner doesn't answer, and the young man gets even more nervous with the other's silence. Annoyed, the boy reminds the shadow that they made a contract and that it should be helping now. He continues shouting for the entity to say something as the beams get dangerously close. One of the attacks hits him squarely and goes through his body, causing a serious injury. With the impact, the young man spits up a strange liquid and feels agonizing pain from the blow. He realizes the situation is bad, and that if this continues, they will both end up done for here. The water creature gives an evil smile and prepares one last attack to end it all. Finally, an energy beam hits the protagonist in the head, and he screams in pain from the final blow. Lying on the ground and all injured, the young man calls for his brother, showing he still cares about him. Even almost out of strength, he swears he will save his relative from that monster at any cost. With great effort, the boy leans on his katana and tries to get up to continue the fight. Suddenly, his eyes begin to glow with an intense red light, showing his new determination. A red energy emerges from his chest, and he prepares to unleash all his hidden power. The young man wonders what that was as the dark energy flows back through his sword. The black and red aura completely envelops him, and he feels the power of the contract once more. With a focused look, the hero concentrates so as not to lose control of that overwhelming force. Strange talismans appear around him as the dark energy expands across the battlefield. Seeing this, the water creature wastes no time and concentrates a huge sphere of power to attack. Then the monster fires a beam of blue energy with full force in the protagonist's direction. But the redhead gives an evil smile, and his eyes glow, showing he is no longer afraid. Without backing down a step, the boy faces the attack head-on, prepared to fight back with everything he's got. He raises his sword, which is now covered in a dark and powerful aura, ready for the cut. With a swift movement, the hero slices the energy beam in half, as if it were nothing. The blow goes through the monster and hits its purple core, breaking the source of its elemental power. With that, the creature's core shatters into several pieces, and its energy begins to dissipate. The core fragments fall onto the pavement, and the water monster finally meets its end. The redhead stands next to his fallen brother as the dark energy slowly disappears. He positions himself in front of his relative, showing that he will protect him from any danger that appears. With a sinister smile and glowing eyes, the hero seems possessed by the new, scary dark power. He then raises his sword over his brother, showing he will protect him from anyone who gets close. Suddenly, a new hunter appears with blue lightning all over his body, interrupting the tense moment. The newcomer advances with speed and attacks the redhead with a powerful and unexpected electric blow. With a leap, he lands on the ground, says he will take the boy to a safe place from there. We find out he is Minato as Ioe, the number 1 S rank, and he came to rescue the hero's brother. The redhead gets into a fighting stance, and the other asks who he is, and tells him not to cause trouble. But the hunter scoffs and says on the phone that the boy probably won't cooperate at all. With that, the hero advances with his dark sword to attack the new enemy without a second thought. The S rank notices the sword got bigger and asks if the redhead doesn't know who he really is. He continues to think he's famous, but the protagonist doesn't seem to care one bit about it. Then the hero attacks again with his black blade, but the other manages to dodge with ease. The hunter apologizes and says he'll have to call it self-defense as he gets ready. With that, a blue energy explosion occurs, and the S rank shows he also has incredible power. The redhead seems exhausted, and the dark energy begins to slowly disappear from his body. He ends up fainting and falling to the ground after using so much power at once in the battle. Sometime later, the boy wakes up in a hospital bed, all bandaged up and completely confused. He gets a scare seeing Minato there and shouts, asking if he's really the famous number 1 S rank hunter. The young man asks about his brother, and the S rank says the medical team is already taking care of everything. The hunter explains that they checked and saw that the redhead had just made a brand new contract. With a serious look, The S-rank hunter asks which entity the boy made his new contract with. The redhead explains that he doesn't know because the voice no longer responds, and the other finds that very strange. Then Minato asks why he tried so hard for the promotion test, and the young man says it's due to a lack of talent. The S-rank gets annoyed and says he didn't ask why he failed, but why he kept trying. With a clenched fist, the hero replies that he needs to catch up to someone no matter what. He reveals that this person is his younger brother and shows great determination in his eyes. The hunter is shocked to learn that he is the brother of the 5th, ranked S-rank and doubts and F-rank can do it. Finding the situation funny, the man starts to laugh and asks if the boy is being serious. With a smile, he says he likes the redhead and found him to be a very interesting person indeed. He then throws a piece of paper to the hero, who doesn't understand what it is and is very confused. The S-rank says goodbye and tells the young man to go to the location on the note the next day, because it's a promise. On the paper is written an address in Japanese that seems to be for a special classroom. The next day at a fancy modern school, the sky is clear and the sun is shining brightly. In the hallway, the protagonist wonders what he's going to do there and confesses that he's very nervous. Mustering his courage, he decides to open the classroom door to see what awaits him inside. Suddenly, a giant explosion occurs, throwing tables and chairs everywhere with force. In the middle of the mess, a blue-haired boy with a spear appears, ready for battle. A blonde girl with red streaks also appears in the middle of the confusion with an angry look. The two stare each other down, and the redhead is caught in the middle, not understanding anything about these super strong people. Outside, Minato looks at the destroyed classroom and asks what happened on the first day of class. Back in the classroom, our hero is all beaten up, while the other students stare at him curiously. One of the white-haired boys points at the newcomer and shouts that he's the guy who caused the earlier mess. A purple-haired girl then starts arguing with the redhead, while the teacher finds the fight amusing. Then the instructor decides to start the class and goes to the blackboard to calm everyone down. With a smile, he introduces himself as Minato Izaioi and says he will be their teacher from that day on. He asks everyone to introduce themselves in order, starting with the blonde girl in the first row of the class. The young woman's name is Rin Shishiku, a D-rank hunter who has a contract with the hero Beowulf. Next is Fugo Mizukiri, also a D-rank hunter whose partner is the Roman goddess Minerva. Suddenly, the blue-haired girl slams her classmate's head on the desk and says she's eager to get to work. She is Masamune, a C-rank hunter, and her contractor is the famous swordsman Okita Soji. Everyone is confused by the way she talks, and the girl seems very proud of her idol. Fugo then asks about her strange outfit, and the young woman is happy he noticed. She explains that she greatly admires the Shinsengumi, a group of legendary samurai from ancient Japan. But her biggest idol is the captain of the 1st Division, the sword genius Okita Soji. That's why her appearance is a tribute, and she even imitates his pose with 2 katanas in hand. Far away, a mysterious figure hides behind a locker, seemingly very scared. We find out it's Okita Soji himself, who wonders why his contractor scares him so much. The teacher interrupts the presentation and says they are running late and need to continue quickly. It's our hero's turn, who introduces himself as Hinata Kamio, an F-rank support from the rear guard. But when they ask about his contract, he says he doesn't know, leaving all his classmates shocked. The teacher reveals that the newcomer made his contract yesterday, and the blonde girl is shocked by the news. The white-haired boy complains that the war started 10 years ago, and that the god candidate is very relaxed. Then the instructor proposes a pop quiz and asks what the 4 students in the class have in common. The blonde guesses it's their age, but the master says that although it's true, it's not the right answer. The white-haired young man realizes the answer is that they all have very unstable abilities. The blue-haired girl adds that they can't communicate properly with their partners. The blonde understands that they lose control easily, and the teacher summarizes that's why they don't improve. The master explains that's why he gathered the 4 of them there. But first, they will review some things. He takes out a cigarette and asks what the victory condition is for the Divine King Selection War. Then the instructor calls on the white-haired boy to answer, but he seems very confused by the question. The young man replies that the god candidate and their human partner need to solve the Ragnarok problem together. The teacher asks the blue-haired girl for the method, who replies that it is still unknown to everyone. He questions the blonde about the reward, and she explains that if her partner becomes king, they get one wish. But the master corrects her and says they don't fight for the good of the world, but for their own selfish desires. That's why the Academy's policy is to keep the monsters under control, while searching for clues to close the gate. However, he warns that there are chosen ones who don't care about the lives of others, and looks at the newcomer. The redhead gets tense when the teacher mentions the name of the group known as the God Hunters. The instructor confirms and explains that there are two major organizations trying to solve Ragnarok in the country. The first is the Academy, and the second is this dark group, but in the end, only one can win the war. That's why the God Hunters are trying to eliminate the competition before Ragnarok is resolved. The teacher continues explaining and says with a smile that, to be honest, the Academy is not in a good position at the moment. He reveals that several high-level hunters have been defeated, and even some S-ranks were injured in the battles. The blonde girl is shocked that an S-rank lost, and her white-haired classmate comments that this would be a huge scandal. But the instructor says with a dark aura that it doesn't matter because he is stronger than all the S ranks combined. The blue-haired girl is impressed by his confidence, while the other young man seems very annoyed by the arrogance. Minato returns to normal and explains that's why it's urgent to strengthen their forces, and he gathered all those promising young people there. All the students get super excited when they realize they will receive personal training from the #1 hunter in the rankings. The redhead becomes determined and thinks that if he works hard there, he will surely be able to catch up to his brother. The master then turns to the newcomer and says that first, he needs to learn to control his power and work as a team. With a smile, he touches the boy's shoulder and tells him to try not to get taken out as he releases of blue energy. A bluish ray envelopes the protagonist's body, who doesn't understand what's suddenly happening at that moment. The young man is confused, and when he opens his eyes, he realizes he is no longer in the classroom with his classmates. He is now on a desolate battlefield, full of swords stuck in the ground under an orange sky. The young man looks around and wonders where he is as he sees countless weapons and torn flags everywhere. Desperate, the redhead starts running and shouting for the teacher and his classmates, but no one answers his call. He continues running alone through that strange place without finding a single living soul along the path he takes. Suddenly, the boy stops at the edge of a cliff and sees a mysterious figure sitting right below him. The silhouette says it's been a while since last night, and the protagonist is frozen with surprise. The young man recognizes the voice from the previous night, and the entity scolds him for his lack of manners when addressing a samurai. The entity then stands up and says it is in a good mood today, and will therefore ignore the boy's lack of respect. The redhead yells at the entity and asks why it stopped responding, but the samurai says he just lost interest. He explains that he was moved by the young man's determination, but the fight was a pathetic and shameful excuse. Therefore, the swordsman says the young man is not worthy of his power, and that it was just a one-time favor, not to be repeated. The boy then questions if the entity doesn't also want the Divine King's throne, but it immediately denies it without hesitation. The samurai reveals that he only intends to wander the mortal world and pass the time until this selection war is over. But the redhead doesn't give up and shouts with determination that he will catch up to his younger brother, no matter what. He then begs the entity called Kuroyasha to lend him its strength so he can achieve his goal. With a sidelong glance, the swordsman seems to have taken an interest in the boy's desperate plea before him. He then throws a sword to the young man and proposes a challenge. If he can wound him with one blow, he will lend his power. The samurai prepares for the duel, and tells the young man to pick up the sword from the ground to start the test at once. With a serious look, Koryasha holds his own katana and tells the boy to prove his worth at that moment. A frightening red aura envelopes the protagonist, who feels the immense pressure of the swordsman's power. With a trembling hand, the young man bends down to pick up the sword that is stuck in the ground right in front of him. He finally grips the weapon firmly and shouts that he will get through this challenge at any cost. With that, the hero runs with all his might towards the samurai, ready to deliver the blow that will seal his fate. The boy tries to attack, but Koryasha defends himself effortlessly, showing his superiority in battle. With a look of contempt, the samurai says the young man's blade can't even truly reach him. Enveloped by a dark energy, he asks if the boy is afraid to actually cut someone in the fight. He then warns that if the young man doesn't have the determination to cut, he will be the only one getting sliced that way. The blow hits the redhead squarely, and he is shocked to realize he was easily cut by the swordsman. The boy is completely confused as he sees the sword pass through his body without any difficulty. With the impact, he falls to the ground, and a pool of a red substance quickly begins to form around him. The swordsman then holds the young man's head and asks how it feels to be just an object. Koryasha finds the boy's reaction strange, as he seems to feel nothing at that moment. It turns out the redhead is just feeling very sleepy, and his eyelids begin to slowly close. Suddenly, he wakes up back on the floor with a start and realizes it was all just an illusion. The young man puts his hand on his neck and breathes a sigh of relief to see his head is still in the right place. But the shock was so great that he starts to feel very nauseous and has an urge to get sick. With that, he can't hold it in and ends up throwing up everything right there on the battlefield. The young man wonders if he just met his end and remembers the samurai cutting off his head without any mercy. The entity looks at him with contempt and calls him pathetic for his exaggerated reaction to the test. The swordsman explains that lords and heroes live in their own worlds created by their minds. To exemplify, he shows a vision of a huge war with thousands of soldiers fighting bravely. He continues, saying that in that place, everyone's life and passing are in his hands to decide. The redhead finally understands that it wasn't real, and the samurai tells him to go back to his world. A dark energy then appears behind the boy, creating a strange and mysterious passage in the air. The portal transforms into a gate, and the entity advises that he can return to the mortal world through there. The samurai says goodbye and mentions that they will probably never meet again after that day. But the young man clenches his fist tightly, showing he won't accept that farewell so easily. Standing in front of the gate, the young man seems to have made a final decision about his future from that point on. The samurai remains silent, waiting for the final decision of the boy who is standing in front of the gate. Suddenly, the redhead charges forward with a bluish energy on his sword, ready for a surprise attack. With a swift movement, he tries to hit the swordsman, but his blow is blocked with great ease. The entity then grabs the young man's wrist tightly, preventing him from continuing with the unexpected attack. With a single move, the samurai brutally throws the young man to the ground, showing his superiority. Lying on the ground, the boy apologizes, and Koryasha asks what the meaning of that action was. The protagonist confesses that he doesn't have enough determination and is afraid of cutting and being cut. Even with fear, he says he won't run away because although he couldn't save his parents, he still has his brother. With a shout of determination, the young man says he wants the strength necessary to protect his family. Upon hearing this, the swordsman seems a little surprised by the young man's new conviction before him. The entity then tells the boy to get up and says that it now recognizes his determination is genuine. The redhead is happy, but out of nowhere, he is hit by a powerful blow that throws him back with full force. The samurai explains that although he recognizes his will, the condition to help him still hasn't changed. He continues, saying that if the young man wants to catch up to his brother, he himself needs to become much stronger. Koryasha warns that he won't send him away anymore and defeats him again for him to try to hit him. The entity says the young man can be defeated hundreds or even thousands of times if necessary. Even fallen and injured, the boy gets up once more with a purple energy flowing through his body. With the sword in hand, he shouts that he will try again and runs to attack the samurai once more. The swordsman gives a smile and comments that the young man is full of spirit and tells him to keep it up. But the blow is useless, and the boy is blocked again without even managing to scratch his opponent. The boy is hit once more, and a deep cut opens on his chest, showing the brutality of the training. With that, he is defeated in various different ways and screams in pain with every blow he receives from the swordsman. Time passes, and the training continues tirelessly on top of a cliff under a dark and starry sky. Even exhausted and breaking into a cold sweat, the redhead refuses to give up and prepares for another round of combat. Lying on the ground once again, he says it's not over yet, and that he will continue fighting until the end. The entity then comments that this is already the 372nd time, and that the boy still keeps attacking head-on. Then the young man advances again with his sword and engages in a direct confrontation with the samurai, who has a purple aura. Suddenly, the swordsman is surprised to notice a change in his opponent's attack strategy. With a smile of pure determination, the young man shows that he has finally learned something from so many defeats. He shouts that he got the samurai, and his attack seems like it will finally hit the target this time. But the blow just grazes him, and the hero is frustrated for getting so close to victory and failing. Kuroyasha realizes that the repeated move was a bait, and the boy guarantees that next time he'll hit. The swordsman becomes thoughtful and admits that even a novice learns something after being beaten hundreds of times. That's why he decides to change things up and releases an even more powerful dark energy than before. With that, his sword transforms into a different weapon, covered by a purple and intimidating aura. The protagonist is shocked to see his master's weapon change shape right in front of him. The entity reveals that it has mastery of all weapons and summons several floating blades around it. He explains that in his time, you couldn't survive with just swordsmanship, as he attacks the boy with a shadow. Now with a spear, the samurai attacks from top to bottom and pierces the redhead's chest without any mercy. The young man feels agonizing pain as the purple energy from the spear passes through his body, leaving him paralyzed. With a look of panic, the young man sees a dark spear pass through his head without him being able to react in time. The swordsman then switches weapons to a bow, and the boy is shocked by his opponent's new tactic. Desperate, the redhead tries to run to put more distance between them and escape the long-range attacks. But a purple energy arrow hits him squarely in the back, and he screams in pain from the impact of the blow. A huge hole opens in his chest, and he can see the samurai on the other side through the wound. The entity explains that things are different against long-range enemies, and that anything goes in a fight. Lying on the ground once more, the swordsman provokes him for having failed even at being defeated correctly. With a curved and shining blade, Kuroyasha says he will end the young man's suffering at once. But suddenly, the redhead attacks from below and manages to hit the samurai's chin with a surprise blow. The swordsman understands that all the pain the boy endured was to land a single, precise attack. With his hand bleeding, Kuroyasha is impressed by the strategy and determination of the young man before him. He then sheathes his sword and seems to have finally made up his mind about what to do with the young man. The redhead asks if it was a dirty trick, but the samurai says a hit is a hit and that he keeps his word. With that, he promises that he will fight alongside the boy until the end as a true battle partner. The entity offers its own katana to the young man, sealing the contract between the two with a dark aura. With an ear-to-ear grin, the protagonist accepts the weapon and thanks his new master for the chance. Back at the gate, Kuroyasha warns that it's time to return to the mortal world and end the training. The young man walks towards the exit, but a mysterious and injured figure appears on the other side of the portal. It's the blue-haired girl, who warns that problems have also started happening on the outside. The young man asks if he just has to enter the portal, and the samurai confirms that it will take him back home. The redhead is startled by the purple portal, and the entity scolds him, telling him not to be afraid of every little thing. Impatiently, the samurai kicks the boy, throwing him into the portal and telling him to hurry up. From afar, Kuroyasha watches the young man disappear into the vortex, and seems to be saying goodbye to him forever. With that, the young man screams desperately as he falls into a dark, purple abyss, not knowing where he'll end up. Suddenly, he wakes up with his face on the desk, and realizes he is back in the academy classroom. Alone in the room, the protagonist sees everything destroyed and doesn't understand what happened there with his classmates. Looking at the clock on the wall, the young man is shocked to see that only 1 hour has passed in the real world. Kuroyasha then appears beside him and explains that place was not the mortal world, which is why time is different. He continues, saying that 3 days in that place are equivalent to just 1 hour in the boy's world. With a goofy smile, the redhead is overjoyed, and the entity asks what strange face he is making. The young man wipes his sweat, and is thankful it wasn't a dream, as the teacher appears at the classroom door. The instructor welcomes the student, and gives him a friendly pat on the head. With a sideways smile, the master comments that it seems the special training went well for the newcomer. The entity vanishes into thin air, and the teacher asks if the boy managed to get along without being defeated. But the young man replies that he was actually defeated hundreds of times during the intensive training. The S-rank hunter is impressed, as normally, a single time is enough to shake anyone's mind. The hero asks the samurai to go easier next time, but he replies that there's no way he's doing that. The young man then asks about the other classmates, and the teacher points to the window outside. The redhead is shocked to see all his classmates fallen and defeated in the courtyard of the hunter's school. He asks why everyone is like that, and the master says he didn't fight them directly, as he did with him. The teacher explains that he gave the other students a small skill test while they were waiting for him to return. With that, the master says that now that he knows what each of them can do, he has a new plan for the training. From that moment on, everyone there would train in pairs to improve their teamwork skills. The first pair formed is Mizukuri and Shishiku, who don't seem to like the teacher's idea at all. The white-haired boy breaks into a cold sweat and can't believe he has to be paired with that girl of all people. The blonde is not happy either and huffs in anger, showing she doesn't want to work with her classmate. The instructor then shows a poster with 2 straw dolls and explains what the pair's task will be. The white-haired young man complains and calls the girl a gorilla, but she gets furious with her classmate's insult. The master ignores the argument and says he will explain the rules on the training field, because if he leaves the 2 alone, they will fight. With that, he calls the next pair, which is Kamio and Ibu, and the blue-haired girl seems very excited about the partnership. The teacher explains that their training will be a serious fight, with abilities allowed to test their limits. He then tells the 2 to go on ahead, and they start walking down the school hallway side by side. The redhead tries to start a conversation with his classmate, but she seems very focused on the path ahead. The girl says he doesn't need to be formal, and that he can call her Masamune, since they are the same age. The young man is a bit embarrassed, but agrees to call her by her first name, and she calls him Master. Suddenly, the young woman stops and asks if the teacher didn't say he couldn't talk to his contractor. She continues, saying she noticed his partner was scared and wanted to know if it had to do with that. Okita then runs off terrified, and the girl yells at him, not understanding why he is so afraid of her. The young woman explains that since they made the contract 10 years ago, she has done everything to get closer to him. She even filled her room with photos and posters of her idol, but it seems that only scared him even more. She continues, telling how she visited all the places connected to her idol, taking photos and notes about everything. The young woman explains that she researched his life day and night since childhood to completely understand her hero. With that, the girl says she constantly talks to her partner to show how much she respects and admires him, but she shouts in frustration and wonders why the swordsman doesn't return all this love she feels for him. The redhead thinks that maybe her obsession is a bit exaggerated as the two face each other in the middle of the gym. Then the protagonist summons his partner, Kuroyasha, who appears behind him with a dark and powerful aura. With that, the young man assumes a new form and prepares for battle with a katana in hand and a determined look. The blue-haired girl is super impressed with her classmate's resonance and praises his gallant appearance. With a confident smile, the young man reveals that this is the first time he's managed to resonate on his own. Then the girl challenges him to a fight, and he asks, confused, if she won't resonate with her partner too. She explains that she can't resonate because her contractor seems to avoid her all the time and doesn't talk to her. Even so, the young woman tells her classmate not to worry because she will fight with everything she has anyway. Without wasting time, the girl unsheathes her sword with a swift movement and prepares for the attack. With a powerful leap, she advances through the air and attacks the redhead from above with her sharp blade. Observing the scene, Kuroyasha seems interested in the girl's skill and lets out a sound of surprise. The swordswoman reveals that her family has a sword dojo and that she is an assistant instructor there. The entity then warns its partner to be careful because that little girl is not just playing around. Enveloped by a fiery aura, the young woman shows her power, and the redhead realizes she is strong even without resonance. With that, their swords clash with full force, creating sparks and showing the power of the impact. The battle intensifies, and the two exchange several rapid blows in a fierce swordsmanship contest. In the middle of the fight, the entity speaks to the redhead, and the young man gets annoyed, asking if it has to be right now. The swordsman says he wants to see the girl's full power and tells the young man to make her resonate no matter what. He then explains that if the opponent is a samurai, there is a very easy way to make her cooperate with him. The protagonist agrees to try as the girl prepares for a powerful blow with her sword. The redhead also assumes an attack stance, with his katana glowing with a dense, purple energy. With a swift movement, he advances to attack, and the young woman is surprised by her classmate's new tactic. She notices something strange about her opponent's sword, and her eye reflects the dark energy that envelopes it. With a look of astonishment, the girl sees the dark blow approaching her faster and faster. She tries to dodge but realizes she won't be able to escape in time from that final and precise attack. In a last attempt, the young woman prepares to defend with her own blade, but it seems too late. Suddenly, another figure appears and blocks the attack with a different weapon, to everyone's surprise. This new warrior begins to concentrate a huge amount of green energy in his hands to retaliate. With that, he fires a beam called the Midyear of Wisdom with overwhelming and destructive power. The attack hits a bizarre creature with a scary mask and razor, sharp teeth squarely. The monster is then caught by this blow, which ends up injuring it, and the enemy is defeated and dissolves into several blue pixels, while the redhead celebrates the victory. With that, the whole team comes together and celebrates, saying their coordination was simply perfect. Excited, they decide to have a party at one of their houses, while the protagonist seems a bit annoyed. But suddenly, the redhead notices a strange machine in the back of the hall and wonders what it is. Then, a pair of mysterious hands fiddles with the machine's gears and activates a secret mechanism. With that, the man in the suit activates the machine, and a purple portal opens behind him from which two figures emerge. With a huge smile, he congratulates the young people for passing the test and praises the fight they had. The redhead is confused and thanks him awkwardly, asking if that guy is one of the academy's instructors. The mysterious man apologizes for bothering them, but says he has a proposal to make to the young people there. With a sinister look, he invites them to join his group, the feared God Hunters. Back in the fight, the blue-haired girl is shocked to see her classmates' sword starting to resonate. She then takes a stance and says she doesn't know who they are, but won't let them lay a finger on the boy. Her partner, Okita Soji, the captain of the first division of the Shinsengumi, finally appears to help. The swordsman tells his partner to ready her sword, and the young woman is thrilled to see him in action. He offers his strength to finish off those troublemakers as he faces the protagonist and his entity, Kuroyasha gives a smile and asks his partner if it wasn't exactly as he had said it would happen. The redhead returns to normal and apologizes to his classmate, explaining what his entity had just said. The entity explains that samurai trust their instincts and feel compelled to protect the weaker ones. The young man asks what he should do as he watches the girl from afar through a circular vision. With a dark voice, the partner whispers in his ear and gives a very direct order for him to eliminate the girl. The hero shouts for the entity to stop joking, but explains that it's just to pretend he's going to do it. The redhead then explains that's why he tried the attack, and we see Okita all nervous and trembling with fear. The girl's eyes light up, and she realizes her partner really cares about her after all. With tears in her eyes, the young woman says she was sure he hated her, and that's why she was so happy now. She continues, saying she thought she would never be able to talk to him again, as the swordsman looks away. The swordsman holds the girl's hand and apologizes for making her feel that way, explaining he chose her because he recognized her worth. He then asks the young woman to fight alongside him, and her face blushes with happiness upon hearing the invitation. The girl then bows in gratitude to the redhead, and the young man says he just wanted to see her full strength. The young woman then says that it might be a poor excuse, but as a thank you, she will show her power. With a new appearance and a different sword, she prepares to show her true strength in battle. The protagonist also wastes no time and spins his dark blade, preparing for the confrontation. Suddenly, a bluish energy begins to form on the gym floor, indicating a new attack. Then the swordswoman advances with her triple thrust technique, unleashing an overwhelming power. The redhead is completely shocked by the speed of the blow and realizes the situation has become very serious. With that, a huge explosion occurs in the middle of the gym, raising a cloud of dust and debris. Sometime later, the two walk down the school hallway, looking very tired after the intense training. Everyone seems exhausted, but the girl is super happy, while the entities comment on the training. They then arrive at the door of training room B and seem to be looking for their other classmates. The protagonist wonders if the others are still playing tag as they look down the empty hallway. They then find the teacher sitting on the floor smoking, and the man asks how the pair's training went. The instructor notices that the two finally got along, and the swordsman is all embarrassed by the comment. The master ruffles the girl's hair and explains that he knew they would only understand each other in a serious fight. Suddenly, the redhead notices a fiery energy at the end of the hallway and sees a monstrous creature appearing. The beastly creature punches the ground with all its might, causing a huge explosion of flames and debris. The blow throws the other boy far away, and he yells at his classmate for attacking him like that. The teacher explains that the training was a different kind of tag, where only the one running could attack to control their powers, but he admits that their partners ended up being much more problematic than he initially imagined. We then see the hero Beowulf laughing like a madman and telling his partner to finish off the opponent without mercy. Meanwhile, the other young man desperately asks for his goddess Minerva to contain the enemy's fury. The boy looks around confused because he can't find his partner anywhere in the gym. Suddenly, an owl appears and asks him to speak quietly because the goddess of wisdom, Minerva, is sleeping. The young man is shocked and asks why she is sleeping in the middle of the fight, while the other attacks him from behind. With that, the poor guy gets beaten up badly, and the scene shows the intensity of the thrashing he received. Back in the present, all the students are exhausted on the floor, and the instructor announces the final activity of the day. With puppets on his fingers, he reveals that the challenge will be a 1-on-4 fight against himself. The master gives the young people 5 minutes of rest, while they continue lying on the floor, out of strength. Enveloped in a dark aura, the teacher waits while one of the students says they don't stand a chance if they attack all at once. The blonde asks if the redhead is scared, but he says he's not stupid enough to fight an S-rank without a plan. The white-haired young man suggests they create a strategy, but the other girl thinks it won't help. Then the boy says they need to at least divide the roles, since they have no teamwork. He explains that he and the blonde are specialists, he being long range and she short range. With that, they decide to stay in the front and back while the redhead and the other girl cover the middle of the field. The instructor asks if the strategy meeting is over as the four prepare for the final combat. He then throws his cigarette into the air and warns, "It will be the signal for the start of the great battle." With focused gazes, the four students watch the cigarette fall and prepare for the imminent attack. With that, the muscular hero yells for the blonde to advance, while the girl complains that she doesn't like receiving orders from anyone during combat. At that moment, the furious young woman launches into a frontal attack charged with yellow energy to try to hit the instructor by surprise. But the master just smiles and blocks the blow with one hand, showing that her physical strength is still not enough to defeat him. Seeing the opening, the redhead shouts for his blue-haired partner, who immediately jumps, ready to deliver a precise cut with her katana. Then the two attack together in perfect sync as they try to corner the strongest hunter in the room with their swift movements. On the side, the blonde's partner celebrates the hit but soon realizes something is wrong, because the teacher doesn't seem to have taken any damage. With a calm look, the instructor explains that the plan to use the classmate as a distraction was good, but the shouts gave away their entire intention. The protagonist is in shock, realizing that even with a combined attack, they couldn't even scratch the opponent's defense. He notices the man is using resonance only on certain limbs to save energy, and decides to advance for one more desperate attempt. With great anger, the young man tries a direct blow, but the master just observes the movement with a look of total boredom at the situation. Suddenly, magical roots emerge from the ground and trap the veteran's legs, who praises the student's unexpected teamwork. But the S-rank hunter unleashes a gigantic explosion of blue lightning that illuminates the entire gym and forcefully throws the four young people away. With a cry of power, the instructor states that no one will defeat him in a brute force contest, and the energy takes over the whole place. We then see the training room completely destroyed, with craters on the floor and debris scattered everywhere after the attack. The result is a total defeat in just 20 seconds, leaving the four newcomers lying on the floor, completely exhausted and out of breath. Catching his breath, the redhead wonders who that man's divine contractor is, since most S-ranks prefer to keep it a secret. The students discuss that some gods prefer anonymity, but the orange-haired young man still feels that something is very strange in the air. Suddenly, a childish voice comments that all of this is very boring, and the mood in the room instantly changes to something heavier. The mysterious figure says the war is at a stalemate and asks if the master really has time to be playing with children. In that instant, the teacher's expression turns to pure terror, and he desperately shouts for the unknown being to get away from the boy. The figure reveals herself to be Zeus herself, the queen of the gods, who has a powerful golden aura around her. She then clings to the redhead and asks the teacher why he is training the competition instead of eliminating it. With a malicious look, the entity says it would be much better if he just finished them all off at once. She continues, saying that the weak will perish, and that the old king didn't care about humanity at all. Sometime later, the sun begins to set, and the Hunter Academy is bathed in a calm, orange light. In the hallway, we see the result of the battle, with a hole in the wall and destroyed tables and chairs everywhere. Back in the room, the students are completely exhausted, and the white-haired boy complains that it was an exaggeration. The blonde also complains that they were dragged there and still had to fight against the strongest S-rank. The evil entity then appears again with a purple aura, showing that she was the final challenge of the day. With that, the white-haired boy asks if they really think they will be able to survive that training, but the blue-haired girl slams the table and shouts that they will never know if they don't try with everything they've got. She continues, telling them not to worry about the future, because tomorrow's problems are for tomorrow. The redhead praises his classmates' optimism, and the blonde says it's a waste of time to get stressed out and suggests they go home. Suddenly, The teacher appears in the destroyed hallway and says it's good that they are all still around. With a smile, he warns that there is still one last place he really wants to show all his students. The students then begin to beg for mercy, as they can't take any more training that day. The master ignores their pleas and promises it will be very quick as he drags the young people across the schoolyard. He takes them to a huge, modern building and assures them that they will all love what they will see inside. The protagonist and his blue-haired classmate are very confused, not understanding what is really happening. Upon entering the place, everyone's jaw drops at the luxury of the lobby, which has a giant chandelier and a fountain. The students are impressed to discover they are in an exclusive dormitory for high-level hunters. The place has a fancy cafeteria with all. You can eat Japanese, Western, and Chinese food for all residents. In addition, there is a complete fitness gym with the most modern equipment on the market available. To top off the luxury, they also have access to a huge bathhouse that is open 24 hours a day. The blue-haired girl is amazed by everything, but soon gets worried and asks how much the rent is. With a smile, the teacher replies that it's all free, and the young woman is completely shocked by the news. A screen explains that the Hunter Training Institution is a government agency founded to solve the gate problem. This organization manages all the chosen ones in Japan and trains those who want to become hunters. As they have the crucial role of protecting the citizens, their budget far exceeds that of the police. The purple-haired classmate comments that it looks like a luxury hotel and that the S-ranked dorms are even better. The blonde then calls the others with an excited shout for them to see the incredible room she found. The room is super spacious and luxurious, with a comfortable sofa and bright, golden lighting. The instructor then tells them to enjoy the view, because from the next day on, that will be their new home. Everyone is super happy with the news and begins to celebrate in different ways inside the room. The blonde girl has an expression of pure euphoria and lets out a cry of joy at the news. She then grabs the teacher and asks if they can live there too, and the redhead gets worried about being an F rank. The master confirms and says that the facility staff was actually thrilled to have them all there. He shows an occupancy permit and says the request for 4 rooms was sudden, but the supervisor was thrilled. The 2 girls jump for joy and celebrate together, saying it all feels like a dream come true. The white-haired boy then suggests having a housewarming party for the room, and the redhead agrees immediately. The white-haired classmate is lost in thought while the housewarming party is being planned by everyone. The redhead then notices that his friend isn't coming along, and he says he'll leave the tidying up to them. The next day, the city wakes up to a clear blue sky as the young people prepare to move. In a room with bunk beds, the blonde girl finishes packing her bags with a smile on her face. She then says goodbye to the children of the Asura orphanage, showing that she grew up there her whole life. Meanwhile, the blue-haired girl carefully packs an action figure of her idol, Okida. With a sweaty forehead, the young woman seems satisfied with the work she's done to organize all her things. From afar, her divine partner is shocked to see the absurd amount of boxes she is taking. As for the white-haired young man, he peeks over a wall and calls for his older brother with a smile. The young man seems very happy and calm as he prepares to go to the new academy dormitory. Elsewhere, the protagonist is at home and receives a pat on the head from someone while his head is bowed. He then kneels in a tatami room and begins to pray with his hands together in a sign of respect. With his eyes closed, the young man seems to be talking to someone very important to him at that moment. In front of him is an altar with photos of his parents, and he tells them he has finally become a chosen one. The hero says he still can't compare to Yuzuki, but that won't stay that way for long. With a clenched fist, he promises he will become strong enough to be able to protect his younger brother. He continues, saying he has the #1 rank hunter as a teacher and has even made some friends. With a determined look, the young man promises his parents that he will do his best from now on. Suddenly, an elderly woman appears behind him and calls him by name, interrupting his private conversation. The old woman, who is his grandmother, apologizes for having interrupted his conversation with his late parents. His grandmother calls him to eat, and he asks what's up as he turns to her. The young man looks at the clock and says he's short on time, but that he'll eat with her next time. But the old woman's face turns serious, and she says this might be the last time they see each other. The young man is surprised by the comment, and without understanding anything, he ends up agreeing to stay. At the table, the grandmother shows that she prepared his favorite dishes and tells him to eat as much as he wants. With that, the three of them sit down to eat together, and the grandson thanks her, saying he will enjoy the meal. The grandfather then comments that he said the same thing to his brother, but that the redhead needs to remember something. With a serious look, the old man says that he is his own person, and that he doesn't need to do things like his brother does. The protagonist is moved by his grandfather's words, and calls his name with a slightly trembling voice. He confesses that he is still a little scared and wonders if he will be able to handle everything, but his grandfather assures him that he will be fine, because he has always had the strength to never give up on his dreams. The grandmother remembers that since he was little, he always got up and ran again, even after falling and crying. With a proud look, the old woman says they saw how hard their grandson worked to get there. The grandfather then adds that his parents in heaven are surely very proud of him too. The boy is very moved, and a glimmer of hope appears on his face after hearing all that. With a smile, he thanks them and promises he will do his best so he can be proud of himself. He then says goodbye, and his family's words fill him with determination for what's to come. A few weeks later, we see a training dummy being smashed with full force in the academy's gym. The teacher then shouts into a megaphone, telling the next student to get ready to continue the training. The challenge is a precision shooting exercise against robots, and the goal is for each to defeat 10 of them. With that, the two girls prepare for the exercise, as the narrator shouts for them to get ready. Then the signal is given, and the two unleash a massive energy attack that destroys all the robots around. On another battlefield, the teacher announces that the simulated battle team has a 30-second break. With that, our hero jumps into the air and prepares to deliver a powerful blow against his blonde opponent. He then uses his dark sword to defend against a swift attack and blocks the blow with precision. The girl falls to the ground, but with a huge smile, she tells him not to hold back and to fight with everything he's got. He also shouts for her not to hold back and prepares to counter-attack with his dark blade. Using her brute strength, the blonde rips a giant piece of the floor to use as a weapon in the combat. She then throws the huge piece of debris at the young man, who prepares to face the attack head-on. With that, the two clash in a gigantic explosion of energy that shakes the entire gym. After a while, the clock strikes noon, and the instructor praises everyone for their good work. He then announces the end of the morning's training as the students look completely exhausted. The blonde celebrates with her partner for not losing control, and the redhead admits he can't beat her in strength. The white-haired classmate argues with his divine partner because she fell asleep again in the second half. The teacher comments that they seem much more lively, as they used to run out of energy very quickly before. He observes that after 3 hours of training, everyone can maintain resonance, and it's time for the next phase. With a smile, he announces the next stage and shows a mission to defeat monsters in a factory. All 4 students have a look of surprise when they see that their first real mission has arrived. They are then taken to a huge industrial complex, full of pipes and metal buildings. There, an employee thanks them for their help and says he didn't expect them to arrive so quickly, praising the academy. The factory employee cries and complains to the redhead that he can't shut down the production line for every little thing. The young man then asks where the creature causing trouble is, and the man points to the sky. He looks up and sees several silhouettes of birds flying in circles right above the factory. Suddenly, the birds reveal themselves to be bizarre monsters with flaming skulls and glowing eyes. The man explains that no one knows when they arrived, and that these creatures attack the employees whenever they want. He continues, saying that 5 people have already ended up in the hospital because of the surprise attacks. In addition, he says there are now rumors of phantoms at night, and people are starting to quit. With that, the employee grabs the young man's hands and begs him to avenge his injured coworkers. The protagonist gets a serious look, and with a drop of sweat on his face, he agrees to help. Angrily, he shouts that he will make sure none of those flying monsters can escape from that place. But now alone, he wonders how on earth he will manage to defeat something that flies so high in the sky. His divine partner then appears and asks how he made such a bold promise without having any plan in mind. The entity then asks if he will just stand there waiting for those weird birds to come down on their own. The young man says that would take too long and prepares for battle, releasing his dark energy. With that, he stomps hard on the ground, creating a shock wave that kicks up dust and stones around. Using the momentum from the ground, he launches himself into the air with his sword, ready for an aerial attack. The flying creature is completely shocked to see the young man flying towards it with speed. With a smile, he says that if they don't come down, then he just needs to get close enough to them himself. He then hits the creature squarely, and the impact of the blow throws him to the side with considerable force. But suddenly, he starts to fall and screams in surprise, not understanding what just happened. The redhead then goes into a total panic, realizing his risky aerial maneuver was not planned all the way through. Desperately, he shouts that he completely forgot to think about how he would land safely from that height. With an absurd impact, the boy hits the back of a parked car and causes a huge commotion on the street. Even all banged up, the young man lands on some soft bags, and his entity calls him a fool for being so reckless. But the hero gets up with difficulty and states that on the next try, he will manage to finish the mission for good. The young man then runs towards the danger again, while his dark master asks if he really intends to continue with this. High above, the flying creatures continue to circle the factory, waiting for the right moment to attack anyone who gets close. With a swift jump, the protagonist advances through the air again and shouts that the monsters will pay dearly for underestimating his strength. Suddenly, the hero is hit by a quick blow and spits up something, feeling intense pain go through his body in mid-air. With the impact, the redhead is thrown against a huge metal structure and is left breathless from the violent blow. Lying on the ground, the poor guy tries to catch his breath, while the swordsman warns that the creature has just been toying with him the whole time. The firebirds then watch everything from the top of a gas tank and seem to be waiting for the sun to set completely. The young man gets frustrated and hides with his hands on his face because he can't think of any way to bring down that monster. He then remembers the incredible weapon switching technique his master used during the intensive training in the shadow world. At that moment, the young man asks if he can do that too, but the shadow replies that mastery of all weapons requires a lot of training. But the entity decides to give its apprentice a chance and tells him to give it a shot, while the boy gets super excited about the idea. With that, the master teaches that the first step is to imagine one's own shadow as if it were a very soft and moldable metal. The hero tries to visualize a bow with all possible details, but realizes the task is much more difficult than he imagined. Suddenly, an explosion of purple energy envelops the protagonist's body, and he lets out a cry of surprise at such power. But the power ends up failing, and the samurai explains that it's impossible to create a bow without ever having touched one in real life before. The samurai tells his partner to wait and notes that the situation has gotten even worse than before. The two then look up at the sky and see a swarm of flying creatures covering the red moon. One of the birds unleashes a fiery and blue energy, showing that its power has suddenly increased greatly. To the hero's astonishment, all the monsters begin to merge into a single giant creature. The young man then remembers the rumors of phantoms and understands that's what the employee was talking about. With that, a colossal beast with blue and orange flames emerges and stares at the young man with hatred. The protagonist is shocked and shouts in disbelief that all those creatures have joined into one. Without wasting time, The giant monster attacks with an energy blast and destroys a metal tower. With the impact, several pieces of debris fly everywhere, and the redhead tries to protect himself as best he can. The entity warns him to use resonance, or else he'll end up becoming an easy target for the creature. He tries to activate the power, and his sword starts to glow, but the energy seems very unstable. Suddenly, the power manifests as a purple crystal in his hand, but soon begins to fade. The energy disappears completely, and the young man becomes desperate, not understanding what went wrong. With that, the flying creature approaches to attack, while the entity just observes the scene. The young man stumbles backward and keeps wondering why his power isn't working now. He shouts in frustration for not being able to use resonance as the monster prepares to attack. Desperate, the protagonist runs and hides behind some pipes to avoid being seen by the enemy. The giant creature flies over him, searching for its prey with a furious look. Lying on the ground, the samurai asks if he can use the power yet, and the young man says he will try again. With that, he sits down to meditate, and a purple aura slowly begins to form around him. But the attempt fails, and the young man wonders why the resonance stopped working all of a sudden. The entity then explains that is simply the limit of the vessel he currently possesses. The samurai then tells his partner to remember what the teacher told him a few days ago. With that, we go back to the classroom where the instructor is preparing to announce the topic of the lesson. The master writes on the blackboard and reveals that the day's topic will be about the power of resonance. The white-haired boy complains, saying they already know how to use it, and that the class is kind of useless. The teacher then challenges him and asks the young man to explain to the class what resonance is. The young man replies that it's when you take your partner's power, but the master finds the answer too vague. He explains that it is a technique to use the entity's strength as if it were your own for real, but the power of gods and heroes is too strong for a human body to handle it all. If the power is used carelessly, the user can lose control, or the ability might stop working. That's why each chosen one has a type of vessel to accept and withstand all this energy. The more resonance is used, the larger and more resistant this vessel becomes over time. Thus, the greater the capacity, the longer the resonance lasts, and the stronger the techniques become. The master explains that all the basic training they've had so far was to strengthen this. He then finishes by saying that it's up to them to make their partner's power shine, or be wasted. Back in the present, the samurai asks if the young man has finally remembered the important lesson. The entity explains that the fight has been going on for a long time, and that's why the boy's energy simply ran out. Therefore, the shadow suggests they retreat and let someone else take care of the monster, but the young man hesitates. The swordsman then questions his partner's hesitation, who seems to have had a last-minute idea. Suddenly, some glowing feathers fall from the sky with great speed and stick into the ground. With the impact, a fire explosion occurs, and the redhead is startled by the power of the attack. He then realizes the feathers came from the giant creature and prepares for what's to come. The flying monster screams and faces the two with a look of pure fury, showing it will not back down. With an intense glow, the creature begins to charge purple energy in its metallic wings. The creature then fires a shower of sharp feathers that fly at high speed in their direction. Desperate, the protagonist shouts that the situation has become very bad and tries to think of a way to escape. The entity tells him to run to the nearest building, and the two dash down the street as fast as possible. In the middle of the run, the young man notices something strange and sees the image of his divine partner superimposed on his own. One of the feathers pierces his leg, and the young man screams in pain as he falls injured in the middle of the street. The entity shouts for him not to stop, as he will become an easy target if he stays still on the ground like that. With great effort, the hero gets up and continues running, while the flying monster pursues him closely. The young man manages to hide in a narrow alley and tries to catch his breath after all the running. But the creature doesn't give up and appears at the end of the alley with its mouth open, ready to attack with full force. The protagonist breathes heavily and manages to hide behind some pipes to avoid being seen by the enemy. He then looks at his hand and sees that one of the monster's feathers is stuck in it and bleeding a lot. The samurai says they can't run anymore, and that they've reached their limit with that injured leg. The entity advises that luckily the creature seems to have lost sight of them and suggests calling for reinforcements. But suddenly, the samurai looks at his partner with a look of astonishment and notices something strange. The young man begins to concentrate a purple energy in his hands, and the entity asks what he is doing. The young man says he is trying to form the bow, and that he felt he almost succeeded the other time, but the samurai shouts for him to stop, as it is a total and useless waste of time. The entity explains that with both of them almost out of energy, there is no way he can create a new weapon. The young man then remembers the master's instructions and thinks about how the shadow should be a soft metal. He continues the process and tries to remember the exact shape of the bow to be able to create it. With that, he remembers how Kurayasha used the bow in training and tries to visualize the image. The protagonist admits he didn't expect such a strong enemy and that now he can no longer retreat. Suddenly, the creature finds them and attacks with full force, destroying the pipes where they were hiding. The swordsman gets annoyed and confirms that the giant monster has finally managed to find them. He then shouts for his partner to run while the flying beast prepares for a new attack. But the boy's look changes, and with determination, he says that's enough of this whole situation. With that, he finally manages to activate the mastery of all weapons with his dark energy. The monster doesn't wait and fires an energy beam from its mouth to finish them both off. The redhead then shows that he succeeded and creates a huge dark bow with the power of his contract. With a war cry, the hero draws the bowstring, preparing for the most important shot. He then fires a gigantic energy arrow that flies towards the monster with power. The blow hits the creature's core squarely, and it begins to dissolve into dark feathers. With the bow in hand, the young man observes the result of his attack with a focused and serious look. The creature is finally defeated, and the young man stands still as the dark energy dissipates. With a huge smile, he celebrates with his partner, saying he finally pulled it off. The samurai is speechless upon seeing that his partner managed to create a weapon out of thin air. As the adrenaline wears off, the young man begins to feel the pain of the wound and complains a lot. The entity wonders if it's a natural gift or an extraordinary level of focus. He then realizes that at this rate, the young man might even surpass his own limits. The protagonist calls his partner and asks what's up, but he says it was nothing important. Suddenly, the teacher appears and ruffles the boy's hair, praising his great work on the mission. He says the performance was splendid as the redhead prepares for his next challenge. With a new training weapon, the hero concentrates his energy and prepares for the attack. He then fires a training arrow with precision, showing his new skill with the bow. The instructor smokes his cigarette and seems satisfied with the result of the young man's training. The young man asks how he did, and the master says it wasn't bad at all for a rookie. With that level of precision, he guarantees the boy will do well in a real combat. The teacher comments that the redhead has matured a lot since his first mission and is proud. He then says that all 4 students have improved a lot and shows the others training hard. The blonde shows her brute strength by lifting a giant rock while screaming with effort. Her partner also shows his skill and uses a plant power to attack the target. The other boy releases a green energy and seems very tired after using his ability. With an attack of water and leaves, he shows he also has impressive elemental control. The blue-haired girl spins her sword and creates a tornado of blue energy to attack the robots. With a focused and serious look, she shows she is also ready for the next mission that comes. With a slash of energy blades, the blue-haired girl destroys all the robots at once. The protagonist is excited about everyone's progress, and the teacher comments on the next rank evaluation. He then looks at the calendar and realizes that at this rate, everyone might get great results on the upcoming test. Suddenly, the master remembers that the mid-year exams are coming up, and the students go into a total panic. With that, everyone remembers their horrible grades, and that because they are troublemakers, they never did well on tests. The white-haired boy turns and tries to get our hero's attention about the problem that's coming, but the poor guy has already fainted from fear, and his soul even left his body upon remembering his F-rank grade. The narrator explains that the panic is because the hunter department is very unique and different from the others. Once a year, a rank evaluation divides the students from F to S to determine who are the best. The problem is that the classification is decided by the exams, and the best move up while the worst move down. This creates a very rigid system where students with low grades are always looked down upon by others. The teacher apologizes and says he is not very familiar with this grading system at the academy. It turns out he was a genius who always got first place and therefore never worried about it. Back in the gym, the master says the test will be the special class's debut and that he is very excited. With a confident smile, he says he believes his students will surprise everyone on the test. The protagonist stays on the floor and looks at the instructor with a gaze full of determination for the challenge. Sometime later, our hero is getting his food in the cafeteria to have lunch with his friends. At the table, the blonde girl eats with gusto and is surprised when someone suggests a study group. The redhead explains they need to do something, or they'll be in trouble, and asks if each of them is good at something. But the classmate says that most subjects are weak points, and the other suggests they teach each other. Masamune concludes that the focus now is preparing for the exams and seems very excited about the idea of everyone studying together for the test. With that, the redhead comments that the master is counting on their effort, and that's why he feels he needs to dedicate himself much more this time. But the blonde in the group doubts the plan will really work and wonders if their grades will actually go up with this group study. Then the blue-haired girl ignores the doubts and proposes that the four of them work as a team to overcome this great challenge at the academy. They then look at their plates of food and decide it wouldn't hurt to try since everyone's situation is very complicated at the moment. Night falls on the luxurious dormitory as the group gathers in room 302 to begin preparations for the exam. Suddenly, everyone is in shock to discover that one of their classmates got 8th place overall in the ranking of the difficult written tests. With great anger, the young woman points to the silver-haired young man and says she can't believe someone with that face could be so smart. But the protagonist and his classmate are amazed to see the nearly perfect scores on the paper and realize their friend is a true genius. The silver-haired boy explains while lying down that if the test were only written, he would have reached the top of D rank a long time ago. At that moment, we discover that the regular exam is divided into 3 different parts, and that the final grade depends on the sum of all of them. The first part is the written test, which requires knowledge about monster biology and also about the history of legendary gods and heroes. Right after that comes the practical test, which serves to evaluate the students' physical condition and the real utility of their combat skills. Finally, the comprehensive exercise takes place, where students face simulated battles against giant monsters to test their judgment. But the genius of the group complains that he always does poorly in the practical part because his goddess Minerva spends more time sleeping than awake in fights. Then the blonde asks which mythology will be covered this guy's time and discovers that the focus will now be on the Roman and also the Norse gods. With that, the scene changes to the super-equipped fitness gym, where the machines shine under the bright lights from the ceiling of the luxurious facility. At this moment, we see the young people running on the treadmills while the blonde shouts orders for no one to slow down during the heavy training. Time passes, and the redhead ends up fainting on the floor from exhaustion, while the others continue to push themselves to the max to pass the test. In the end, the teacher watches laughing as his team charges forward into combat, showing that they are finally ready for the test. The training continues under a heavy rain as the protagonist struggles with the bow and arrow to improve his new combat skill. With that, 2 weeks pass, and the day of the mid-year exam finally arrives, with all the students gathered in the Great Hall. In the crowd of students, we see a huge commotion as everyone prepares for the start of the most important test of the semester. The group then gets together, and the white-haired young man says they did what they could and even prepared a secret plan for the test. With clenched fists, the group shows confidence and readiness to face the challenge that will decide their future at the academy. Suddenly, a crowd forms, and everyone looks in the same direction, realizing that a famous person has just arrived in the hall. The figure is Yuzuki Kamio, the 5th in the S rank, who waves with a smile to all the girls who are his fans present there. The redhead's friends comment on the newcomer's popularity, but the hero doesn't seem to like seeing that scene at all. Then the two brothers stare at each other from a distance, and the tension in the air becomes evident to everyone watching the exchange of looks. Without caring about the crowd, the younger brother walks confidently towards the protagonist's group of friends. Stopping in front of the redhead, he greets him with a smile and calls him older brother. To everyone's surprise, the three friends are completely shocked and shout at the same time, unable to believe that those two are really brothers. The younger brother comments that he heard about the other's transfer to Professor Monado's special class and seems curious. With a look of contempt, the S rank calls the group a bunch of losers and useless people, making everyone furious. With that, the friends can't hold back and shout at the young man, telling him not to be conceited just because he's an NS rank. But the brother scoffs at their reaction and says those classmates perfectly match the protagonist's level. Angrily, the redhead warns that he doesn't care about insults against him, but he won't allow anyone to speak ill of his friends. The younger brother is a little surprised by the reaction, but soon gives a mocking smile to the other young man. He then turns to leave and tells the group to enjoy it while they play at being friends with each other. Finally, the S rank walks away with a victorious smile and calls them losers once more to provoke his older brother. The younger brother gives a malicious smile and says that no matter how hard the other tries, he will never be able to truly catch up to him. With that, the protagonist and his friends get a serious and determined look after all the humiliation they just suffered there. Then the blue-haired girl finally understands the situation and realizes that the two are actually identical twin brothers. The white-haired classmate then asks why his friend hid this secret for so long, but the redhead doesn't seem to want to answer. At that moment, the young man remembers the terrible day when a bizarre monster attacked his house and changed his life forever. The memory of that day of destruction and his brother's choice still haunts him, and he hangs his head, not knowing what to say. The two girls notice that their friend was shaken by the question and watch him with an expression of pure concern on their faces. The classmate then apologizes for being insensitive, but the protagonist says it's okay and that there's no problem. With that, the blonde turns to her friend and asks if he forgot the reason they worked so hard until that day. With a confident smile, she says they won't just pass the test, but they will also surprise his arrogant brother. The redhead is surprised by his friend's words and seems to have finally regained his determination for the upcoming test. He then thinks to himself if he would really be able to shock his younger brother with his new combat skills. Suddenly, the sound of a microphone echoes through the hall, and all the students look to the stage to see who is about to speak. On stage, the academy director apologizes for his gaffe and prepares to start the big event of the semester. He introduces himself as Ranzo Todo, the director of the Hunter Academy, and apologizes for making everyone wait so long. The man then points to a screen and explains that in recent years, the test has followed a well-defined 3-day schedule. He reveals that the reason for this is simple, as many students were losing their lives during the comprehensive exercise. That's why they use the easier tests at the beginning to eliminate the weaker ones and reduce the number of unnecessary passings. But with a serious look, the director announces that this time things will be different, and they will start with the most difficult exercise. All the students are shocked by the change, and the man says that if they thought it would be the written test, they were sorely mistaken. With a loud laugh, the director says they shouldn't think everything will go as planned, because their worth is tested in unexpected moments. A mysterious hooded figure then observes the speech as the man prepares to reveal the details of what is about to happen. Suddenly, the stage behind the director begins to shake violently and transform into something completely new and different. With that, a huge structure resembling a Japanese gate appears in the middle of the hall, shocking all the students present. The protagonist and his friends are left with their mouths wide open, unable to believe what is happening right in front of them. Then the giant gate opens, revealing a bright, purple portal that leaves everyone even more confused about the situation. From above, we see all the students gathered in the hall as the director observes each of their reactions with a smile on his face. The man announces that the exercise will be a group survival battle where the Academy's classes will fight against each other. He explains that everyone will be sent to a virtual space, and the task is to eliminate all the creatures they find inside. With an excited shout, the director tells the future hunters to show all the results of their hard work so far. With a determined look, the redhead seems ready to face any challenge that comes his way during the surprise test. The man then asks the representatives of each class to come forward and prepare to enter the portal of the challenge. The first to appear is Jinichi-san, the first place of F rank, who seems well prepared with his tactical combat gear. With a war cry, the representative orders his team to advance, and all the F-rank students enter the portal together. From afar, a pink-haired boy watches the scene and prepares to guide his own group into the deadly challenge. We find out he is Haku Yagami, the first of A rank, who calls his classmates to enter the test with great excitement. Next, we see Yorozu Kongoji, the first place of B rank, who leads his group with a very serious and focused expression. The next is Natsuki Sadam, the first of C rank, who seems a bit shy but is ready for the battle that is about to begin. With a golden energy, Makoto Ashiya, the first of D rank, shows great confidence with her overwhelming electric power. Finally, Yutahiko Aizen, the first of E rank, stretches with a bored look, showing he is not worried about the test at all. With that, the protagonist calls his friends, and they prepare to enter the portal with their new battle appearances. From a distance, the black-haired young man watches his brother with a serious look as the group enters the challenge to prove their worth. The director then turns to the S rank and tells him to go too, because even though he is strong, he is still a student at the academy. The man then notices some blue particles in the air and seems to understand that the survival exercise has finally begun. Several floating screens appear, showing each team on its battlefield, and he confirms that the test has already started. The F-rank team appears on a giant wall and comes face to face with a huge golden dragon, ready for a final attack. The A-rank group is in a hellish scenario, fighting against several fire demons with great skill and power. The B rank ended up in an underwater city and now faces gigantic sea creatures with their water powers. Meanwhile, the C rank is in a forest and has to fight a Tyrannosaurus Rex that stares at them with great fury. The D rank is in space and has to deal with alien ships and strange creatures from distant planets. Finally, the E rank faces a horde of goblins, and their leader seems to be having a lot of fun with the intense battle. Observing all this, the director gets a little worried and comments that maybe the test is too difficult for the students. But a mysterious woman calms him down and says she adjusted the difficulty for each rank, so there is no reason to worry. Suddenly, the younger brother approaches the director and says he has a question to ask before going to the test. With a dark look, the young man reveals that he heard rumors that he could be demoted for losing to the water monster. The director's face turns serious, and he asks with a firm voice who told the young man that information. With a sideways smile, the S rank makes a shushing gesture and says the director already knows the answer to that very well. He then proposes a deal and says that if he defeats one of the top students, the demotion will be forgotten forever. The director perceives the young man's intention and upon looking at a video game on the table, understands that he has a specific target. The young man mocks the director for getting old and shows that he is very confident in his plan for the test. With a furious look, the purple-haired woman calls him a brat and dislikes the young man's arrogance. She then makes a bet and says that if he wins the fight, he can have her 4th place in the hunter rankings. The younger brother accepts the challenge immediately and says he will collect on her promise before entering the portal. With a malicious smile, he warns the woman not to forget the deal as a dark energy envelopes him. With that, the portal closes with an intense glow, and the young man finally enters the virtual battlefield. The director is exhausted and complains that he doesn't understand why all S-rank hunters are so hot-headed. Already inside the test, the hero's brother opens his eyes and analyzes the new environment with his enhanced vision. He finds himself on an old Japanese street, full of lanterns and wooden buildings, with a very strange atmosphere. Suddenly, a mysterious hand touches his shoulder, and a female voice calls him a handsome young man to lure him in. Behind a fence, several women in kimonos invite him to have fun with them if he has some free time, but the S-rank completely ignores the invitation, and the women wonder why he is already leaving. The woman calls him cold, and out of nowhere, her hand turns into a claw that attacks him with sharp, purple nails. With that, the young man is surrounded by an explosion of intense flames, but he seems very calm about the situation. Enveloped in fire, he asks the examiner if she is underestimating him, or if that is her best attack. The woman tells him to relax because she is just getting started and releases a blue aura with several paper talismans. With a swift movement, she throws the talismans, which glow with a powerful purple energy, in his direction. The yes-rank gives a malicious smile and says he liked what he saw, showing that the challenge has finally truly begun. With a focused expression, the examiner summons new talismans with pentagram symbols for a new blow. With that, several purple spirits and monsters appear around him, and the woman says that's what she wanted to hear. Finally, the young man is hit by several purple energy beams that descend from the sky with overwhelming force. With his hand in flames, the S-rank prepares to counter the examiner's attack with all his power. He unleashes an overwhelming wave of fire that destroys all the spirits that were around him. From the flames emerge 2 guardians of the underworld with huge clubs, ready for battle. The horse-headed and ox-headed creatures raise their weapons to crush the young man with a double blow. With an explosion of purple energy and fire, the young man defends himself from the combined attack of the 2 monsters. The ground cracks with the impact, and the guardian's weapons get stuck in the rebel after the blow. Floating in the air, the young man mocks the monsters, saying it must be hard to see in the dark. With a smile, he says he will light up everything for them and releases a huge amount of flames. He then concentrates an absurd amount of fire energy in his hand, preparing for an area attack. He then unleashes his primeval glow technique, which creates a giant pillar of fire over the city. With that, the entire battlefield is engulfed in flames, and the young man stands amidst the destruction. He comments that none of them are any fun as the examiner appears in snake form in the middle of the fire. The young man says that if they fought her head on, they would surely be defeated in an instant. The woman looks exhausted and out of breath as her paper talismans begin to burn from the heat. From afar, the director watches the fight and seems to be thinking about something as the examiner continues the test. With his hand on his forehead, the man laments the ridiculous bet the woman just made with the S-rank. It turns out that even while accepting the young man's challenge, the examiner did not stop her other tasks. She was using her shikigami to monitor the other battlefields at the same time. With that, the woman managed to see the situation of all 8 battlefields simultaneously. She then directed all the fights at the same time, showing her incredible control skills. The director comments that the 10th generation of hunters is recognized as the best in quality and quantity in history. With that, the white-haired man asks Ayosaki if she really has a plan to win the fight. Her challenge is to defeat the 5th seat, and also the entire legendary golden generation alone in one battle. The purple Haired woman just tells the director to watch everything carefully, as she has everything under control. With a sinister smile, she guarantees that she will finish off her opponent in a very clean and efficient way. The boss then warns her that as a leader, she must never lose to someone below her in the hierarchy. With a blue energy enveloping her, the story goes back 1 year to when the youngest S rank in history emerged. In an alley, a black-haired girl and a red-haired young man comment on the new 16-year-old legend. The redhead calls the girl Hitomi-chan, and she immediately scolds him, telling him not to use that suffix with her. The young man then asks if she doesn't want to become the mentor of that new boy who appeared out of nowhere. He explains that the director asked him, but he believes the girl is more suitable for the job. The colleague continues, saying that the two have something in common, but she angrily asks what that would be. With a cigarette in his mouth, the red-haired young man thinks for a moment before giving his final answer. He explains that they both change personalities like a switch, and the girl gets furious with the comparison. With that, he shows a photo of the new S rank on his phone and asks if she can't notice something. In the photo, the young man is smiling, but his eyes don't smile along, showing a very dark and empty side. He explains that behind that fake smile, there is a hatred so deep it could finish anyone off. The young man offers a drink and says that she is the solution because she is the kindest among all the S ranks. That's why he asks her to be the only person capable of controlling that dangerous boy. With a serious look, the young woman seems to finally understand the gravity of the situation and thinks about what she should do. With that, the young man says goodbye and says he's counting on her help, colleague to colleague, as he leaves. The girl shouts furiously for him to wait and says she never agreed to be that boy's mentor. With a tired sigh, the young woman crouches on the ground, looking completely exhausted by the situation, but with a determined look, she seems to have finally made a decision about what she's going to do. Back in the present, the woman with cards in her hand cries and says it's been a year since she met him. We then see the young S rank in the middle of the fire with a serious and focused expression on his opponent. The story goes back to the past with the girl saying she tried to teach him many things in her own way, but in the end, he was always in his own world and seemed not to have changed at all. The young man then denies it with a smile and says that's not true as he releases a dark energy. With that, he summons giant fire skeletons, showing that his power has increased greatly since the beginning. Thanks to her, the young man finally feels he can reach her and prepares for the final attack. With a powerful blow, he hits the creature squarely and creates a huge explosion of light and energy. The fire attack completely destroys the giant skeleton, which breaks into several pieces in the air. Back in the fight, the woman realizes that quantity alone will not be enough to win this challenge. She then says she has no other choice and prepares to use a new technique with her eyes glowing. The woman cuts her hand and says she's not sure if she can control this form, but she is responsible for him. She then offers her body to the fearsome demon lord, and a dark red energy manifests. With that, the pact is sealed, and the entity accepts the offer of blood to unleash its full power. With a malicious smile, the woman seems ready for battle, and says that now things are going to get started. The young man is shocked, and she reveals that this is the strongest Shikigami she can command in the fight. With a spell, the woman summons the demon King Shutendoji and orders the creature to crush her opponent with everything it's got. The white-haired young man is shocked by the summoning and can't believe what he is seeing in front of him. He wonders how that woman still had so much power stored up and is paralyzed by fear. With no time to react, the demon attacks with a powerful punch and throws him forcefully to the ground. With the impact, the poor guy screams in pain as his body is crushed by the Shikigami's power. The creature then turns to the other young man and prepares to step on him with all its might. But the young man doesn't give up and uses his flames to try to hold back the giant red monster's foot. With that, he summons several fire spheres around him, preparing for a counter-attack. He then unleashes the solar god's Yahello technique, and the flames expand across the battlefield. The fire spheres explode with full force upon, hitting the demon in a massive and powerful attack. Even injured, the young man says he will force the creature to retreat and won't give up the fight so easily. But the demon is unfazed and breaks through the flames with a punch to hit the young man up close. The young man shouts in frustration and calls the creature a monster upon seeing his attack was useless. Suddenly, the demon's punch is stopped by a blue flame that appears out of nowhere, protecting him from the blow. The blue flame comes from the purple-haired woman, who is now standing in front of the young man to protect him. The director watches her on her knees and asks if she used all her power in that final defense. We then go back to the past and see the director scolding her for being so reckless with her power. Suddenly, the Academy's emergency alarm starts to ring and red lights flash everywhere. With a panicked shout, the young woman warns that they are being attacked by an unknown force. On the ground, we see two defeated hunters, and the red-haired young man cries in despair at the scene. With a desperate shout, the young woman warns the director that they are being attacked by an unknown force. With that, the story goes back 1 hour into the past and takes us to a dark castle with blue flames in the background. On top of a wall, the redhead's team observes the place and realizes that this is the location of their test. The blonde in the group smiles and says that to pass, they just need to finish off all the enemies in the castle. Then the blue-haired girl and the protagonist wonder how they are going to get into that place. Suddenly, the castle's drawbridge begins to lower on its own, opening a path for the team to enter. Everyone is on alert and prepares for the battle that is about to begin inside the dark fortress. An army of knights with blue flames then appears, and one of the boys mocks the welcoming party. With that, the battle begins, and the team advances to fight the knights in a city square. The blonde in the group shouts with all her strength and manages to break free from the chains that held her in the air. With a powerful impact, she hits the ground and creates a shockwave that throws the enemies far away. The blue-haired girl closes her eyes for a moment as her bandana shatters into several pieces. She then unleashes a barrage of rapid attacks and cuts down all the knights around her with her sword. The green-haired classmate comments that the enemies are weaker than he thought, and the redhead agrees. The green-haired young man seems very confident, but the protagonist feels that something is wrong with the situation. He remembers that before the training, he would have run from such a large horde of enemies without a second thought. But now he realizes that everyone there has become much stronger and is ready for any challenge. With their new powers, the team shows that they are not afraid and are determined to win the battle. Excited, the protagonist says that at this rate, they can advance straight to the top floor of the castle. But suddenly, the blonde in the group is grabbed by the arm by a dark figure, and the situation becomes serious. With that, the blue-haired girl advances and cuts down several bat-like monsters with her sword in a swift motion. Suddenly, giant flying creatures with red eyes appear and surround the knights in the castle hallway. The green-haired classmate then uses a power of earth spikes to finish off all the enemies at once. After the battle, the team runs through the castle corridors to get to the next room of the challenge. They finally arrive in a room that looks like a church, and the green-haired young man warns that it's the last one. But upon trying to open the door, the protagonist feels a dark pressure and wonders what it is. Very cautiously, he peeks through the crack in the door to see what's on the other side of the dark room. The team enters, and the blonde complains that the place is empty and that she was sure it was the boss room. Suddenly, his green-haired friend grabs him and tells him to wait a second, as he noticed something strange. At the end of the corridor, there is a coffin, and the protagonist asks if that thing isn't moving on its own. With that, a dark red energy begins to emanate from the coffin, with a bloody rose on its lid. Out of nowhere, several bizarre red eyes appear in the darkness, watching the group very attentively. Without a second thought, the fighter advances with her claws to attack, while the others shout for her. She then apologizes and says she's not cool enough to wait for the enemy to make the first move. With a powerful punch on the ground, The girl creates a shock wave that lifts several pieces of debris around. With a smile, she says, "Serves you right," and seems very confident with the result of her surprise attack. But from the shadows, a figure with red claws appears and prepares to attack the young woman from behind. The ground explodes, and debris flies everywhere with the force of the new enemy's impact. The young man then readies his sword to defend his classmate from the mysterious monster's attack. The dark creature attacks with a sword, and the protagonist blocks the blow, while the blonde is startled. The redhead counter-attacks with his sword and manages to push the dark creature back for a moment. With that, the blonde thanks her savior, and the young man says he's glad he arrived in time to help. The green-haired classmate scolds the girl for completely forgetting their secret plan. Then the dungeon boss reveals himself to be a vampire of unknown rank with a malicious smile. Suddenly, several red eyes appear in the darkness and stare at the team with a dark aura. The creature then unleashes a swarm of bats that form a giant mouth to devour them. The green-haired friend is terrified and feels the absurd murderous intent of that monster. The blue-haired girl also can't take the pressure and closes her eyes tightly to resist. She becomes completely paralyzed by fear and can't move properly because of the aura, but that the protagonist calms her down and says they will be fine because they are no longer alone in the fight. Enveloped in a purple energy, the young man remembers all the training they had up to that point. With his sword in hand, he shouts that after so much effort, there's no way they can lose now. The other two classmates prepare for battle and agree with the plan to attack with everything they've got. The swordswoman also recovers and seems ready to show the result of her training. With that, the team comes together and prepares to show what all that training was for. The strategist yells at the blonde to maintain sync, but she says she doesn't need orders. Without wasting time, the vampire advances with incredible speed to attack the girl first. With a swift blow, the monster hits the young woman squarely and throws her far away with great force. With that, the fighter is defeated and falls to the ground, while the impact of the blow destroys everything around. Suddenly, the vampire's face deforms, and he shows his true monstrous appearance in the fight. The girl on the ground gives a sharp, toothed smile and asks the monster what its problem is. It turns out she wasn't defeated and is now holding the vampire with white claws, daring him to escape. With the enemy trapped, the strategist shouts for the other two to attack with everything they've got while he's vulnerable. The redhead takes the chance and advances with his dark energy sword to cut down the enemy right there. With that, the vampire is hit by several blows at the same time and can't defend himself from the attack. Seeing the chance, the protagonist shouts for the group's strategist to initiate his final attack now. The goddess Minerva then appears with a green energy and prepares a spell with a magic circle. The entity then unleashes its power with a serious look and fires a huge blast of green energy. The man in the suit opens his arms in the middle of the castle and invites everyone there to join the feared group of god hunters. Because of this, the young people are terrified and wonder if it's a surprise attack right in the middle of their mission. But the stranger raises his hands in a peace sign and asks them to wait, because he isn't there to fight at the moment. Then he shows a list with the names of each of the 4 friends and reveals that his boss is interested in their talent. With a huge smile, he reaches out his hand and formally asks if the 4 of them would like to join his secret organization. The redhead remains in total silence as a shadow covers his face, showing that he didn't like that absurd proposal at all. Then the white-haired friend explodes with anger and shouts, asking if the villain really thinks they'll become hired guns. The blue-haired girl agrees and states that even though they are rookies, their goal is to use divine power to save human lives. But the recruiter shouts back, admitting they take lives, but claims it's the only way to end the divine war. The hero is confused by the answer and asks if the villain just wants his selfish wish to come true in the end. At that moment, the man lowers his head and remains silent while the atmosphere around them becomes heavy and very tense for the young heroes. Suddenly, a dark aura emerges and he shouts that he does nothing for personal gain as his eyes glow with intense fury. The redhead is startled by the sudden change in behavior, as the stranger begins to remove his clothes to show something important. Then the man turns his back and reveals a giant tattoo of angel wings and Latin words engraved on his skin. The mark shows the group's sacred pact and reveals that they all share a single desire that is much bigger than themselves. Then we see that other members of the organization also have the same mark, showing that everyone shares the same dark objective. The friends are confused, and the protagonist wonders what this important desire could be that unites such dangerous people. With a sinister smile, the mysterious figure prepares to tell the truth behind their intense and harsh actions. Then a vision of the past appears, showing the world being destroyed by dragons and the portal of ruin that changed everything 10 years ago. Finally, he reveals that their only plan is to turn back time to when Ragnarok didn't exist yet, and everyone lived in peace. Because of this, the friends are in shock, and the revelation shatters their reality, like a mirror breaking into 1,000 pieces. Then the recruiter flashes a sinister smile and asks if erasing 10 years of tragedy isn't a noble enough wish. The blonde girl shouts that it's a lie and that a wish like that could never come true, but the man guarantees they have a good reason to believe. With a sideways glance, the villain asks the redhead if he doesn't also have someone he would like to bring back from the past. At that, the protagonist remembers his parents and is terrified to realize that the man knows exactly what his weakness is. The blue-haired girl draws her sword and shouts that she's had enough talk, ordering them to leave that place right now. But a giant bald man approaches and tells her not to be like that, because deep down, she also wants the same thing they do. With his shadow, the brute completely covers the young girl, who is paralyzed in front of such an intimidating figure. The big guy then approaches and says he has nothing more to say to her as he glares at her with total contempt. Without any warning, the man winds up a punch with all his strength and prepares to attack the girl without mercy. With a brutal hit, the villain strikes the girl right in the face, and the impact of the punch echoes throughout the dark castle. Then the brute says he also has nothing to say, and the girl is thrown back by the force of the surprise attack. Fallen and hurt, the girl spits out a strange liquid as her friends scream her name in complete despair at the scene. Feeling very angry, the group realizes the talking is over and now things will be settled through brute force. The man releases a dark energy and orders his henchmen to take down the young heroes without completely finishing them off. The recruiter complains that he was almost convincing them, but the giant calls him soft for talking too much to the enemy. At that, he orders his men to drag the 4 of them out of there and prepares to attack the rest of the group. Then the god hunters charge at the 3 friends, who prepare themselves for the inevitable battle. Amidst the chaos, the protagonist and the blonde girl defend themselves against the attacks from the enemies surrounding them on all sides. With a cry of fury, the redhead goes on the attack, and the all-out brawl finally begins in the middle of the castle hall. With a cry of fury, the protagonist charges forward to attack, but a giant dark hand stops him in his tracks. Then, with a thunderous sound, the battle intensifies, and chaos completely takes over the castle hall. From a distance, the recruiter watches everything and asks the young heroes if they finally understand the situation they've gotten themselves into. With that, the entire team is defeated, and the brute says they should have settled everything with force from the beginning. Then one of the henchmen ties up the green-haired boy, and the villain tells him not to just stand there and to capture all the others. While being held, the redhead screams with all his might for the enemies not to dare touch any of his friends. But the giant ignores him and lands a powerful punch to the poor guy's stomach, who screams in pain from the blow. Fallen on the ground, the man says that brats like him irritate him deeply and holds him tighter. Seeing the scene, the blonde girl in the group screams with hatred and seems ready to strike back for what happened to her teammate. Without thinking twice, she charges forward with an energy punch and hits the brute right in the face. However, The giant laughs and says that hit didn't even tickle, showing off his absurd toughness. He then comments that she won't stop screaming, and with a slap, tosses the girl aside with great ease. Mercilessly, the man grabs her by the face and slams her against the ground, shouting for her to give up already. Then he throws her with all his might against the castle wall, which breaks from the impact of the young girl's body. At that, the girl is thrown outside and falls into an abyss of floating islands with no way to save herself. The redhead is in total shock and can't believe what just happened to his friend right in front of him. Desperate, he reaches out his hand toward the hole in the wall, but it's already too late to do anything. The recruiter shouts at the giant and asks what on earth he thinks he's doing to the young heroes. He complains that the brute could have finished the girl with that fall, and that the boss would be furious. With his hands on his head, the man in the suit panics and wonders what he's going to tell their boss. But the brute groans in pain, and we see that the one responsible for the attack is a white-haired warrior with golden flames. All the villains look up and shout in surprise when they see the new figure who appeared to ruin their plans. The recruiter then panics and begins to scream desperately for help as the flames take over everything. From the flames, a silhouette with glowing eyes emerges and glares at the god hunters with a look of pure fury and hatred. At that, the mysterious warrior lands on the ground and says he finally discovered who is responsible for the mess. Enveloped in fire, the boy shouts that those guys interrupted the important fight he was having with someone named Iosaki. Fallen on the ground, the redhead recognizes the voice and is shocked to see that the warrior is actually his younger brother. At this, the villains are completely confused and wonder what on earth is happening and where that guy came from. Wrapped in flames, Yuzuki holds the unconscious woman, and the villains wonder why the fifth rank appeared there. The protagonist remains on the ground and can only call out his brother's name, unable to believe he is really there to help. With a flaming finger, the boy points at the enemies, showing that his patience has run out and the fight is about to begin. He then creates a dagger of fire and stands in front of his older brother's fallen friends to protect them. The newcomer looks at the blonde girl passed out on the ground and tells her to wake up in a very cold and distant way. He then warns that there's an exit nearby and tells the group to get out of there if they don't want to get caught up in the fight that's about to happen. But the redhead holds his friend in his arms and refuses to run away like that because he hasn't given up on the fight yet. With a dark aura surrounding him, he stands up and screams with all his might that they can still fight together. But his brother tells him to take his friendship, act somewhere else, and stop with that teamwork nonsense. With a look of contempt, he asks if he needs to be even clearer about what he really means by that. Then he calls them dead weight and tells the group of failures to get out of his sight once and for all. Looking at another defeated student, the S rank calls him trash and shows that he doesn't care about absolutely anyone there. The brute then calls the newcomer fifth seat and asks if he can ask him a question. He reveals that he sent dozens of his best men to the area and wants to know what happened to all of them. With a mocking smile, the S rank pretends not to know anything and wonders who these best men could be. Then we see a scene with several defeated bodies on the ground, while golden flames burn everything around them. The other villains are shocked and can't believe that all their comrades were taken out in such a short time. Angrily, the giant shouts for his men to stop panicking and focus on the fight that's coming. He says this is their only chance because the warrior is tired, and defeating him will guarantee a promotion. With that, a horde of god hunters charges forward with their glowing red eyes, ready for a mass attack. Then the giant shouts for everyone to attack the S rank at the same time while he's surrounded by enemies. From above, we see the lone warrior surrounded by dozens of enemies attacking him with their weapons from all sides. But the young man releases a giant fire explosion that creates a fire tornado and throws everyone back. The brute watches the S rank's overwhelming power and is impressed by the intensity of the fire attack. Calmly, the boy walks out of the flames and the giant realizes he managed to defeat everyone all at once. With a crazy laugh, the young man asks what that was, showing that he didn't feel a thing. The brute gets furious at the provocation, and his eyes glow with blue energy, showing his anger. He screams not to be insulted, and his muscles begin to swell as a dark aura completely surrounds him. With a roar of power, he calls the boy a brat and concentrates a blue energy sphere in his mouth to attack. Then he fires his Atlas X Alexis technique, a purple energy beam that destroys everything in its path. With that, the giant transforms into a colossal monster and flies over the castle in his terrifying new form. The creature roars with power as purple energy surrounds it, and the nearby buildings begin to crumble from the pressure. In his new form, the giant monster stomps hard on the ground and prepares to attack. At that, the redhead tries to protect himself from the shockwave that hits him with full force. Because of that, he and his friends are thrown back by the energy impact. Then the young man carries his blonde friend through a destroyed castle corridor. Panting and exhausted, the boy can barely breathe after so much effort. He finds the other two, and his teammate is happy that everyone is okay. The redhead asks if they can move, but the other one says he needs time. Suddenly, the ceiling begins to crack above them, showing that everything is about to collapse. At that, they look outside and see the giant monster surrounded by purple energy. Meanwhile, the younger brother flies toward the giant monster for the confrontation. The creature calls him an insect and prepares to attack the warrior with everything it has. Then the monster attacks with a powerful punch to crush the boy once and for all. But a pillar of blue light descends from the sky over the city, interrupting the strike. At that, a giant explosion destroys everything and is called the Titan Strike. The monster celebrates, but the S rank is no longer there, and he becomes very confused. Suddenly, the warrior appears behind him and says that a strong attack doesn't matter. He adds that the strike means nothing if it doesn't hit the target. With that, he summons a spear of flames for his next powerful attack. He also releases a firestorm with his other battle technique. The monster is terrified and screams in rage upon seeing the boy's power. A colossal explosion swallows the scene as the monster is hit directly by the flame warrior's devastating blow. At that, the young heroes watch from afar and realize the prodigy defeated in seconds the creature they didn't even scratch. The blue-haired boy smiles and comments that the protagonist's younger brother is truly insane and a real elite hero. But the red-haired hero lowers his head and remains silent while his teammate calls his name, finding his sad behavior strange. At that moment, the boy begins to think about the time he became a chosen one and feels he was just kidding himself all along. He believed he had truly become powerful and that he could finally walk with his head held high without depending on anyone. With that feeling, the boy thought he now possessed the necessary strength to protect any loved one in danger. He remembers his past fights and how he used his skills, but realizes that was nothing compared to the real world. Then, the protagonist recalls the image of his defeated friends and understands that reality was much crueler than he imagined. Then, the young man clenches his fist tightly as frustration takes over his mind and makes him tremble with anger. With a cry from deep in his soul, the redhead declares that he wants to get much stronger so he never becomes dead weight again. The light-haired veteran is amazed by the boy's determination and watches him with a look of pure surprise. Soon after, the man's expression softens, showing he understands the pain of feeling helpless against a powerful enemy. With a comforting smile, he places his hand on the boy's shoulder and states that this concern is just an older brother thing. At that instant, we see that the other two team members are alive and recovering as Light returns to the battlefield. His friend encourages the protagonist to grow along with the whole group so they can overcome any challenge in the future. With that, the terrible castle invasion incident finally ends, leaving only ruins and smoke behind. Later, the official report confirms that the attack resulted in 2 lost lives and 11 injured, plus 27 missing. The fact that the villains targeted rookie students shakes the foundation of the academy and leaves all the students terrified. Finally, we discover that those who vanished joined the god hunters of their own free will, while the villains watch everything from their secret base. At that moment, the red-haired hero grinds his teeth in anger and states that the group can still fight even in such a complicated situation for everyone. At that, the elite prodigy appears on the screen calling the team failures while a mysterious man watches the scene in a theater room. Then, the light-haired boy is surprised by what he sees and wonders what is really happening to the young warriors there. But the villain hidden in the shadows flashes a smile and comments that he finds those twins interesting because of the power they demonstrate. 4 months have passed since the attack, and to overcome their frustration, they focused solely on training. With that, the group of heroes heads to Training Ground B for another intense session. Inside, their green-haired companion uses his earth spikes to attack his opponent, but the red-headed agilely dodges the spikes that shoot up from the ground with great speed. In another corner of the arena, a purple-haired guy unleashes a powerful blue energy attack. With that, the electric blow rushes forward with full force against his adversary, who watches it all. The technique then creates a giant pillar of energy that rises to the heavens with devastating power. Through the smoke, he observes the result of his strike with a very confident expression, but the blonde girl in the group uses a crystal shield to defend her teammate from the final blow. In another fight, the green-haired guy drives his spear toward the warrior, calling her Rin. From above, the protagonist looks down on his defeated teammates and asks if that's all they've got. Then, the blue-haired swordsman faces off against the hero and his shadow entity for a duel. With a swift movement, she charges forward with her sword to strike the guy with everything she has. But the shadow entity doesn't wait and launches several purple energy spikes at her. Suddenly, the purple-haired boy appears with wings and attacks the two from above with his powers. He stops the spikes and says that kind of power won't be able to reach him up there. With a smirk on his face, the guy says it's about time to end this whole situation, but the warrior appears in the air with a firearm, ready to unleash a powerful blow. The girl is shocked and wonders how he can still move after that attack. Unfazed, the purple-haired young man punches the ground, creating a massive shockwave. Then, the warrior floats in the air and says she's going to end it all with a single strike. He activates his technique, Karanos Thunder, and releases an absurd amount of blue energy. The others panic, and their green-haired teammate is shocked by the total resonance. At this, the redhead steps in front of everyone and yells for his friends to get behind him. But the purple-haired guy smiles and says the hero was too slow to react. In that moment, an explosion of blue lightning engulfs the entire training ground. From the impact of the blow, the redhead is thrown far away, unable to defend himself. Completely defeated, his sword falls to the ground, and the training finally comes to an end. A timer then marks 5 minutes and 18 seconds of intense combat between them. The purple-haired guy says they passed, and we see the whole group on the ground, exhausted. Even so, the blue-haired girl celebrates and calls her friend for a high five. This is Hinata Kamio, the protagonist, who has the ability Black Blade Shadow Stitch. With this, he's a versatile fighter who uses his shadow to fight in various ways. This is Masamune, a swordswoman with the ability called Kikyu, Ikamanji Noramune. She's a prodigy who owns her technique and dominates close and mid-range combat. The blonde of the group is Rin Shishiku, and her powerful ability is called Dragon Hunter Impact. With super strength and endurance, she can take hits and counter with finishing attacks. The white-haired guy is Fugo Mekumari, with the ability Guardian Sage Magi Guard. He uses various types of magic to support his allies and heal minor injuries. The redhead then brags, saying it was thanks to him that Fugo learned to use healing magic. Seeing the team so in sync, the guy says it's time to take the next step in their training. Suddenly, something strange starts falling from the ceiling, catching the entire group's attention. The redhead wonders if it's an emergency alert, and his teammate gets a bad feeling. An urgent notice from HQ informs them that a projectile has been launched from the Gate of Ruin. With that, all units must return to their posts and prepare for combat. Breaking news on TV shows that a projectile was launched from a place called Ragnarok. After flying 90 kilometers from Shibuya, the object landed on the slopes of Mount Fuji. A reporter then broadcasts live from Lake Yamanaka, which is very close to the impact point. The projectile hit the mountain's 7th station, and a helicopter shows smoke at the location. The reconnaissance team that was sent in was wiped out, and the area is now a rank A difficulty. The protagonist wonders what's going on, and his friend finds it strange that there are no monsters. Watching the news, the coach says that this situation could be very interesting. He then suggests they accept a rank, a mission to handle the problem. The man confirms and says he can recommend them to the academy with his authority, but he lights a cigarette and warns that at their level, it would be like walking to their doom. With a serious look, the man says the decision to go or not is entirely theirs. The team becomes thoughtful about the risky proposal and weighs all their options. After a moment, the redhead takes a step forward with a look full of determination. With a loud shout, he declares that he accepts the challenge and wants to participate in the mission. His companions are completely surprised by their friend's sudden decision. His friends get super excited about the idea and celebrate the chance to prove their worth. With a satisfied smile, the coach smokes his cigarette and says that it's settled then. He then sends the group on the emergency mission, and they all set off with great determination. Soon, the team arrives in a forest area and observes a strange, dark energy in the place. They approach the edge of a cliff and find a cave with a sinister aura. With that, the protagonist calls his friends, and they all prepare to enter the dungeon. The team of heroes then walks toward the dark entrance, not knowing what awaits them there. Once inside, the girls are amazed and wonder what an incredible place this is. But the white-haired guy says this was more or less what he expected to see. The place was actually a cave of glowing crystals that didn't seem normal at all. Then one of the guys compares the place to an RPG dungeon, and the other immediately agrees. In the middle of the cave, their white-haired companion becomes thoughtful with a serious expression. He then turns and asks his friends why they joined the selection war. The blonde girl is startled by the question, but he says it's just to pass the time and get to know each other. The redhead agrees and says he joined to catch up to his brother and because of a great wish. As for the swordswoman, she says she joined to improve herself and become a true samurai. After hearing the answers, the group turns and asks about their white-haired friend's reason. With a very sly smile, the guy simply reveals that he joined for the money. Hearing that, the warrior of the group is in a state of shock, unable to believe the answer. With her face red with anger, the girl explodes and looks like she's about to attack her teammate. She then grabs him by the collar of his shirt and yells at him, asking if he's serious. He apologizes and says he doesn't have a grand objective like the rest of the hero group. The others try to calm the situation down, saying that everyone has their own reasons for being there, but the girl doesn't calm down and punches her teammate's arm in anger. The redhead finds it strange that she's so mad about money and notices she's acting differently. Suddenly, the blonde girl lowers her head with a very sad and shaken expression. Their blue-haired friend tries to calm the two down, saying they don't need to be so tense. She then suggests they change focus and continue exploring to find the enemies. But as she points to one side, she notices a strange glow coming from the cave ceiling. Suddenly, several sharp, purple crystals begin to fall toward the poor girl. With no time to react, one of the crystals hits the swordswoman square in the shoulder, and she screams in pain. Her companions panic, and the redhead runs to help his injured friend on the ground. But suddenly, an army of skeletons with a blue aura rises from the ground to attack them. At this, the blonde girl of the group shouts for everyone to fall back as the situation becomes dangerous. In desperation, the team runs toward a wooden door to escape the horde of monsters. Then, the protagonist picks up his friend in his arms and runs as the skeletons pursue them. They manage to get through just in time, and the door slams shut, sealing off the enemies. After their escape, the team finds themselves in a new area of the cave, much wider and darker. The two of them are impressed by the size of the place and feel that it's very different in here. At that moment, the redhead despairs when he sees the state his partner is in. The girl's skin starts to change color, and they realize she's been hit with poison. So, he calls the mage and asks if the guy knows how to perform a detoxification. He says he doesn't, but that there's no other choice, and his entity prepares for the magic. With that, the white-haired guy tells them to remove the spike and hold the girl down. He then prepares to remove the crystal from the young woman's shoulder very carefully. After taking out the object, he throws it on the ground and prepares to begin the healing. But as he looks at the wound, the mage notices that something very strange is happening. Suddenly, the cave floor begins to shake violently, and everyone is on high alert. With the shaking, the ceiling collapses, and the group protects themselves from the falling debris. Out of nowhere, a giant paw with sharp claws emerges from the dust and stomps hard on the ground. Then a three-headed monster appears, and we discover it's a chimera. The mage panics and realizes they've accidentally ended up in the boss room. The warrior and the mage prepare for the fight, saying there's no other option, but the white-haired guy stops her and says they can't beat that monster. Desperate, he grabs his friend's arm and yells that the only way out is to run, but the blonde girl refuses to obey and says she won't take orders from him, no way. With the redhead carrying the swordswoman, the mage positions himself in front to protect them. He then yells for the protagonist to get the girl away from there as fast as possible. Their white-haired friend says there's no way they can all make it out alive and tells the redhead to go. With his friend on his back, the hero has a pained expression and feels powerless. With a look of pure frustration, the protagonist grinds his teeth and feels a deep pain. He then falls to his knees, still carrying his friend, and blames himself for his weakness. At that moment, the warrior and the mage face the boss and prepare for the final battle. With a cry of rage, the blonde girl charges forward and tells the monster to look at her. She then leaps and lands a powerful punch on the giant chimera's lion head. But the monster doesn't even flinch, and the girl realizes her blow had no effect at all. With a look of despair, the warrior sees that her attack didn't work against the creature. The snake head then wraps its body around her, and the mage despairs at the sight. Without a second thought, the guy charges forward to attack the goat head and save his friend, but the creature attacks him with its horns and throws him far away with a single blow. Lying on the ground, the mage complains about the situation as smoke rises around him. Suddenly, the giant snake's tail strikes the two of them from above with all its might. The blow creates a huge explosion of blue crystals that hits them both head on. With that, the two companions are defeated and fall to the ground, completely exhausted. The mage tries to get up and tells his friend to hang on, because he'll heal her soon. With a green energy, the girl gets up with difficulty and approaches her teammate. On the ground, she asks him if he really joined the war just for the money. The mage confirms and asks what's wrong with being poor and needing cash. With tears in his eyes, the guy reveals he has 4 brothers and 2 sisters to take care of. The warrior is speechless upon hearing the truth about her friend's real motivation. He says he wants to earn a lot of money so they can all live well and be happy. At this, the girl lets out a laugh and seems to understand her partner's situation better. She then says he should have told everyone the truth from the beginning. Suddenly, the snake head prepares to attack the warrior with an energy beam. The monster then fires a powerful blue tornado in the young warrior's direction. The blow creates an explosion of blue light that engulfs the girl with devastating power. But as it turns to attack again, the chimera notices something very strange in the area. Suddenly, a slash of purple energy appears out of nowhere and strikes the creature's head. With that, a giant blade of dark energy appears in the middle of the battlefield, and the protagonist appears in a new form, ready to face the monster alone. His friends are shocked and shout the redhead's name, not believing what they're seeing. With a look of pure fury, the hero faces the monster with his sword of blue flames. He then positions himself in front of his friends, to protect them from the chimera's attack. Lying on the ground, the group's mage can't believe his friend came back to the fight. Very angrily, he shouts and asks why the protagonist came back to a place like this. His companion keeps yelling, saying there's no way they can beat that creature. He insists the redhead should have run away and left them behind to save himself. But the protagonist remains silent with a dark expression, without looking back. With determination, he says he just wants to get stronger, and the mage is surprised by this. He thinks that if he keeps running and hiding, he'll never be able to get stronger. With a pained cry, the redhead declares that he doesn't want to lose anyone important ever again. At this, the hero clenches his fist tightly and is filled with a new determination. Shrouded in purple energy, he guarantees that all four of them will get out of there alive. The chimera's snake head then looks at him with an injury in its blue eye. The monster charges to devour him, but the guy prepares to use a new technique. He concentrates and starts to imagine a new weapon to use in the decisive battle. With his dark power, the hero begins to shape a weapon that can cut the enemy. With that, he activates mastery of all weapons and materializes his new creation. The weapon is a madamada, and with a precise strike, he cuts off the chimera's snake head. The mage is shocked and can't believe his friend actually managed to do that. The blonde warrior then gets up with a determined smile on her face. She recovers and tells herself that the battle isn't really over yet. With a red aura, the girl shouts that they will all go home together. Her eyes glow with power as she prepares for the final attack against the chimera. She then charges forward and attacks the monster's other two heads with all her might. With a devastating punch, the girl lands a direct hit on the creature's lion head. The blow is so strong that the monster's head begins to shatter in mid-air. The lion head screams in pain as it's completely destroyed by the attack. The protagonist shouts his friend's name as she lands after the powerful blow. He asks if she's okay, and the girl says she taught the monster a good lesson. The two heroes prepare for the final fight and say that now there's only one head left. But suddenly, the chimera releases of purple energy and begins to transform again. The duo is shocked to see the monster's body getting bigger and bigger. With a roar of power, the creature reveals its new form and faces the young warriors. The beast then charges with its energy claws to attack the two with everything it has. With a furious look, the protagonist braces for the impact of the monster's blow, but the creature roars once more, showing it won't go easy in the final battle. At this, the blonde warrior seizes the opportunity and grabs the monster's leg tightly. With a shout, she swings it in the air and says she's going to smash it against the cave floor. The girl continues to spin the monster and throws it violently to end the fight. The creature then crashes to the ground, kicking up a huge cloud of dust. But the monster manages to pierce the girl with its horn, injuring her badly in the process. Lying on the ground, the young woman looks at the creature, which stares back with a look of pure malice. The protagonist then rushes to his friend's side to see if she's okay. The monster wastes no time and leaps to crush the two of them with its full weight. Then the redhead steps in front of his friend to protect her from the beast's final attack. With a determined look, he prepares to counter the blow with all his strength. With his triple thrust technique, the guy launches 3 energy strikes at the monster. The hero seems satisfied with the result of his attack and faces the creature. On the other side of the cave, the swordswoman finally wakes up and sees she's been healed. The mage, panting and sweating, confirms that the detoxification was successful. With that, the girl gets up and tells her friend she's leaving the rest of the fight to him. The redhead then smiles at his sword and prepares for the final blow of the battle. With his purple energy, he remembers the chance his friends created for him. He stomps hard on the ground and channels all his power for the mission's last attack. At this, the hero leaps toward the monster to end it all once and for all. With a shout, he declares that he won't waste the opportunity he was given. The creature roars in pain as the protagonist approaches with his dark blade. With a swift movement, the hero brings his sword down with overwhelming power. The blow hits its mark, and the monster's head is split in two by the final attack. The three friends watch the scene, completely shocked by the protagonist's power. With a final breath, the monster finally falls defeated on the cave floor. Panting, the redhead tells himself they finally managed to win the battle. Suddenly, the swordswoman reaches her hands out toward the guy with a look of admiration. At this, all his friends run to hug the hero and celebrate the great victory. But the group's mage can barely stand and complains about being tired after the fight. With that, they all fall to the ground exhausted, and the protagonist says they did it. The white-haired guy then suggests they continue working together in the future. Everyone agrees, and the redhead looks at his friends with a glint of hope in his eyes. He then smiles at them and agrees with the idea of forming a real team. The four of them then bump fists and promise they'll stick together forever. Meanwhile, at the Academy's headquarters, several people are working in a control room. A screen shows that there will be a regular meeting of the S-rank hunters soon. In the meeting room, several elite hunters are sitting around a table. The number 1 rank brags about how the special class completed a rank A mission. Another hunter is surprised and says he didn't expect him to be a good mentor. The 3rd rank, however, says their potential depends on the commander's skill. The group's 2nd rank watches everything in silence with a very serious expression. The 7th rank then gets worried and asks them not to overburden the medical team. The 5th rank smiles and says he's happy to see his older brother doing well. The other hunters comment on the incredible progress of the F-rank guy. They admit that youth is an amazing thing and that they're excited for the future. But the younger brother steps on his colleague's foot to stop him from talking about it. With a hateful glare, he's shocked to learn that his brother defeated a monster. He then remembers the past and how his brother was a complete failure. Filled with rage, the guy wonders why everyone is praising a loser. In another meeting room, a woman presents a report on the mission. A man with a beard then closes the topic and prepares for the next item on the agenda. He then asks what the current situation is with the god hunters. The hunters look at each other with serious expressions, and tension fills the room. A hunter reports that since the last attack, the god hunters have been quiet. Hearing this, one of the older hunters finds the situation very strange and suspicious. Then she receives a report from the Hokkaido branch with security camera footage. The recording shows 2 hooded figures walking calmly in a public place. They're wearing black cloaks with an emblem and the name of their mysterious group of villains. One of the hunters recognizes the emblem and remembers the tattoo she saw in the past. Yuzuki wonders why they would walk around in public in such a flashy and obvious way, but the older hunter says they aren't stupid and that this is a trap. With that, the woman asks the director what they should do about the villain's invitation. The director, with a serious look, says he doesn't care and that they should walk right into the trap. He says they'll crush the trap with force and summons Minato Aizawa for the mission. The red-haired guy is shocked and refuses to accept the mission. No way. He complains that he's going on vacation the next day and that he hates the cold in Hokkaido. With that, the guy suggests they send Churamaru in his place for the mission. The hunter then yells at Suramaru to wake up and stop drinking during the meeting. Seeing the mess, the man with the eye patch calls the team pathetic and complains about everyone. But the red-haired guy says he'll accept the mission if he can take his students. The director, already tired of the whole discussion, tells him to do whatever he wants. A short time later, the group of heroes arrives at an airport, ready for their trip. But the 2 students are shivering from the cold and wonder where on earth they are. Being so cold, the 2 guys end up hugging each other to try and warm up a bit. Suddenly, the teacher shows up in a luxury car and says he rented it for them. The students are shocked, and he tells them to relax and get in the car. He says he brought warm clothes, and the group travels through a snowy landscape. In the car, the teacher comments that they've only trained and never gone out to have fun. That's why he had the idea of taking a trip to grow closer as a team. He proposes a 2-day trip in Hokkaido, but the redhead knows he's lying. The teacher asks if it's their first time there, and the redhead says he's never left Kanto. He recalls that all the school trips of his generation were canceled for safety reasons. His white-haired friend gets a little embarrassed, but admits he's excited about the trip. With a shout of joy, the teacher celebrates and gets excited for the vacation trip. He says he's going to show his students how to have real fun in the land of snow. The group then practices snowboarding and skiing on a mountain while one of them falls in the snow. After skiing, they walk around the city and take the opportunity to eat local snacks. The two students take pictures in front of a statue and have fun like tourists. They also visit a snow-covered clock tower and appreciate the architecture. The trio then takes a picture with a tall man dressed in traditional local clothing. As night falls, the group relaxes in a traditional house and toasts to the trip's success. But in the middle of the night, the teacher wakes up and checks something important on his phone. He looks at a map and sees the exact location of the target they need to investigate. With everything ready, he wakes up his students and says it's time for them to go. Sleepily, the two guys ask where they're going so early in the morning. The teacher then reveals that they're going to the God Hunters' hideout. With a powerful leap, he grabs the two of them and stomps hard on the snow to gain momentum. He then jumps over a frozen lake, carrying his students with incredible strength. The two of them scream and ask where the teacher is taking them like this. He lands hard in the snow, creating a shock wave with the impact. The instructor says he's taking them to the villains, and the redhead questions him about the trap. With a smile, he says that as hunters, they need to confirm everything with their own eyes. After a long walk, a fox watches the trio from a distance with curiosity. They finally reach their destination, and the teacher informs them that this is the mission location. With a dark look, the redhead realizes that something very strange is going on. He then comes across a severed hand and a lot of blood scattered on the snow. The two students are shocked and speechless at the scene of pure terror. A woman appears and says they took too long to get to the meeting spot. Suddenly, they see a man on top of a pile of defeated monsters. The creatures were rank A and B, and the ground was covered in snow and blood. The two youths are shocked to see so many high-rank monsters defeated. They can't believe a single person managed to defeat all those monsters. The man says he got bored, and that those creatures didn't excite him one bit. With a confident look, the villain hopes his new opponents will be more entertaining. The teacher recognizes the emblem on the cloak and understands who they're dealing with. The mark is the badge of the God Hunters and confirms the enemy's identity. He then tells his students to see this as a lesson and stay out of it. With a smile, he unleashes his electric energy and tells them to just watch. The villain seems curious and watches the scene with an expression of complete calm. With a gesture, he says that if that's the case, he'll entertain all his opponents himself. The teacher laughs and asks if the villain knows who he is, and the enemy says yes. With an ice attack, the villain introduces himself as the strongest hunter in the area. The blow creates a wall of ice that advances and traps the teacher and his students. The two youths shout the teacher's name as the ice wall surrounds them, but the teacher makes a peace sign and doesn't seem worried about the situation. With that, a huge ice prison forms in the middle of the snowy landscape. The villain observes the result of his attack and sees his opponent trapped in the ice. He says it was a mistake to get caught so easily and that he could have escaped. The man reveals that he has a contract with the Dragon King who rules over ice and snow. That's why he can use his power to the fullest, and the temperature reaches -60 degrees. With his feet freezing, the teacher feels the intense cold and the heavy falling snow. He realizes the temperature is still dropping and that they shouldn't stay there for long. The villain and his ice dragon say they could wait until he succumbs to the cold, but he says he wants to see the strength of the man his boss considers dangerous. With his ice sword, the villain charges forward and says he will judge him with his own eyes. He then launches an attack with several ice dragons at his opponent. With a smile, the teacher says he doesn't care about anyone below the boss. He then unleashes an energy blast that destroys the ice dragons in seconds. The villain is impressed by the power and realizes his opponent is very strong. With a furious look, he gets annoyed and says that really ticked him off. With his ice energy, he creates a tornado and says that arrogance can be fatal. The ice storm rushes forward with full force, destroying everything in its path. But the teacher calls the attack on creative and prepares to counter. With a lightning attack, he shatters the ice barrier with impressive power. With a confident smile, the teacher shows he wasn't fazed by the villain's blow. He then tells the enemy that the same goes for him and freezes him with a touch. The blue-haired man is shocked and doesn't understand when he was caught by his opponent. He then realizes the enemy in front of him was just a decoy made of ice. Suddenly, the real villain appears behind the teacher and attacks him with his 2 swords. With a swift blow, he hits the hunter head on and throws him far away with force. The teacher is thrown and ends up trapped in a large ice structure. The ice begins to cover his entire body, and he becomes completely immobilized. With his enemy trapped, the villain says time is up and celebrates his victory. He laughs and says the fight was anticlimactic, but the teacher questions him with a smile. Suddenly, the hunter appears behind the enemy without a scratch and surprises him. In a mocking tone, he says the villain's ability is nothing special. The blue-haired man shouts and doesn't understand how he can move in that temperature. The teacher then points at the villain and asks if he hasn't noticed yet. A drop of water falls on the enemy's forehead, and he starts to sweat nervously. With that, all the ice from the barrier and the dragon begin to melt rapidly. The hunter reveals that his contract is with King Zeus, the supreme god of Olympus. He explains that Zeus is the god of the sky and controls all weather, including ice. An image of Zeus with red lightning appears, showing his overwhelming power. The villain is terrified and calls the teacher a monster upon seeing his true strength. With his final technique, the hunter summons a pillar of lightning that descends from the heavens. The blow creates a giant crater in the ground, and the students run to see the result. The teacher says it's already over, and that it was more work than he expected. He brags that the villain was no match, and turns to his students with a challenge. He says he didn't think they would just stand by, and points to the villain's servants. The 2 hooded figures then reveal their weapons and prepare to attack the group. They fire energy blasts, and the teacher grabs his students to protect them. He says the 2 of them are too strong to be just common henchmen. With that, the teacher realizes they might be stronger than the previous enemy. He tells his students they aren't human and must be creatures. Suddenly, the hunter has a brilliant idea for the off-campus class. He then pushes his 2 students forward and says it's their turn now. With a smile, he says that just watching is boring and that they'll have a combat lesson. The instructor wants to see how they fare against enemies of that power level. The protagonist gets a little nervous, but seems determined to accept the challenge. The 2 students prepare for the fight and release their power auras for combat. With a focused look, the redhead prepares to use all his training in the battle.